Madam President and Senators, good morning. This morning I want to focus on making people priority. A part of the lectionary reading for yesterday, the second Sunday of Easter, focused on Jesus' return to his disciples, particularly Thomas. Thomas had missed Jesus' previous visit 8 days before and expressed doubt about the resurrection unless he could see and touch his mentor for himself. In John 20 and 26, we are taught by Jesus the importance of making people priority, even persons who may not believe in your mission and may require special attention. Listen to John 20 and 26. 8 days later, Jesus' disciples were inside and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Jesus knew the character and potential of Thomas. He required hands-on and visual confirmation to believe in the resurrection of his master, mentor, and teacher. So Jesus came that day to give him the special attention he required and challenged him concerning the limitations of his faith. But Jesus' example can challenge you to examine your leadership team and circle and to determine, are there persons who may require special attention, hands-on training, affirmation, and assistance so that they can refocus and can grow to their full potential. It could have been easy for Jesus to write Thomas off and to move on with those who were fully vested and believed in the resurrection. But no, he knew that Thomas mattered and would make a wonderful contribution to the kingdom in the future. Church tradition and history states that Thomas traveled to Persia and India and became a martyr of the faith in India. 1 Corinthians 16 and 14 states, "Do everything in love." Senators and leaders, I challenge you. This week, take time to see if there are persons on your team who are having challenges and be determined to encourage and build them up. Remember that some persons are like Thomas, who may require special attention, but you can never underestimate how valuable they will be to your team in the future. Thirdly, as leaders, always remember every member of the team is important, and so you must determine their skills, strengths, and areas where they need to grow. And fourthly, never be too busy to take time with the one who may need extra care. John 20 and 27 states, Jesus said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Charles Dickens said, "No one is useless in this world who lightens the burdens of another." Sometimes you may be the only person who may encourage or affirm the potential in that member of the team. Not everyone is like Thomas, who may be vocal about their challenges and struggles. It may require you to open the eyes of your heart and to discern what is going on in the lives of the members of your team and in your circle. Each team is only as strong as the weakest link. Do your best to keep all your links strong. I close with Romans 14 and 13. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of your brother or sister, and I add, team member. Let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for the death and resurrection of your dear Son, Jesus. His example reveals many character traits that can help each of us to grow into our faith, grow close to you, and to those around us. May each senator be strong in their leadership, and may they build up their team and all the persons who serve with them. Guide and protect them this day in all their deliberations. In the name of Jesus we pray. Please join in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, Senators. Order of business for Monday, the 28th day of April, 2005. Adoption of minutes. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Senate held on Thursday, 3rd of April, 2025 be adopted.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, the 3rd of April, 2025 be adopted. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The minutes of Thursday, the 3rd of April, 2025 are hereby adopted. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, swearing in of new senators, communications by the President. It is with a grateful heart and on behalf of our senators here present, the Chair extends sincere gratitude and for the chaplain's devotion to the Senate. In the Bahamas, the month of April is designated as Child Protection Month, a time dedicated to raising awareness and promoting action to prevent child abuse, neglect, or trafficking. The Chair wishes to acknowledge the Department of Social Services, non-governmental organizations, churches, and the wider Bahamas that play a pivotal role with bringing awareness, education, and financial aid to prevent and stop child abuse. In particular, the Chair commends Dr. Sandra Dane Patterson and her stellar team at the Crisis Center for their consistent effort in bringing awareness and education. On the 25th of April 2025, the Crisis Center opened its annual Child Protection Exhibition at the Mall of Marathon. It was an excellent public initiative where scores of students attended and obtained vital information on how sexual predators groom children, safe and unsafe touching, various forms of abuse, and knowing when you are abused. In addition, information was given on how to keep safe and knowing when your rights are violated. The 24-hour child abuse hotline number was prominently displayed. Children in the wider Bahamas, if you're being abused, please contact the 24-hour child abuse hotline at 328-0922 or 322-4999. That's 328-0922 or 322-4999. Or you can WhatsApp 565-9633. That's 565-9633. After the Chair's opening remarks and Mrs. Ann Davis declaring the exhibition officially open, we visited booths with children and personally interacted with many young students and further educated them on sexual abuse, neglect, and how to recognize an abuser. I hasten to add that the protection of children is not solely a government responsibility, but the village includes extended families, churches, the communities, NGOs, and schools. Let us continue to work together, be vigilant, and consistently recommit to a culture of care where the protection of our most precious resource is our main focus, which stimulates the heart of our collective conscience. On a sad note, the Chair extends sincere condolences to the family of the late Dr. John Ellerton Carter. Dr. Carter was an exceptional Christian physician who dedicated his entire life to taking care of the sick. It mattered not to Dr. Carter whether a patient had financial resources to compensate him or if the patient was located on the opposite side of the island. His commitment and dedication to all of his patients and his oath provided the motivation for him to attend to patients no matter where they were located or their financial resources. Prior to examining patients, he took a short moment to witness for Christ and remind each patient of a soon coming Lord and Savior. Dr. Carter was a physician's physician who was highly regarded and respected by his peers, and he will be sorely missed. Prayers and condolences are extended to his wife, Dr. Rhonda Carter, his mother, Ianthe Carter Knight of Barbados, his children, Aisha, Andre, Andrea, Rochelle, and Macaire. The Bahamas Parliament will co-host the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Conference from the 28th of April to the 2nd of May 2025. The theme of the conference is Parliamentarians as Drivers of Economic Empowerment. The Bahamas Parliament will host approximately 60 delegates over 20 Commonwealth countries. Therefore, the Commonwealth family of women will be together for 5 days. And I hasten to add that the men are also invited to attend. I am pleased that in the Senate's gallery, we have representation from the CWP who have joined us today for a real-time session of our Senate proceedings. As I recognize the following persons, I would like for you to please stand. The Honorable Catherine Esther Dost, who is a member of Western Australia's Legislative Council and CWP Vice Chairperson. Welcome. The Honorable Jamaica Williams, Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly for Turks and Caicos Island. Welcome. Ms. Williams, who hails from Wales, and she is the spokesperson of social justice, equalities, and early years. Welcome. And Ms. Sharon Moses, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Secretariat. Did I miss someone? Yes. Okay. Susan LeBlanc from Nova Scotia. Welcome. And that's everyone, right? Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit in our Senate gallery today and observe the proceedings. And you're actually sitting in the third oldest parliament after Westminster. And so with that being said, I'm sure that our senators' decorum will be fitting of our maturity. It is our collective hope. It is our collective hope that you will find this sitting informative and educational. May God bless all of you here present. May God bless you, senators, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This ends the President's communications. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly. Laying of documents by the ministers. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following regulations: the Price Control General Amendment Number 2, Regulations 2025, and the Defense Reserve Amendment Regulations 2025.
Order the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
Yes, Madam President, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate copies of the following: the Public Holidays Easter Monday 2025 Opening of Shops Notice 2025, the Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock Number 2 2027, 2029, 2031, 2034, 2044, and 2054 Directions 2025, and the Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock 2027, 2029, 2032, 2034, 2044, and 2054 Directions 2025.
Other documents be brought up? Order the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents?
There are none, Madam President.
Communications by ministers. Communications by senators. Questions. Answers to questions. Presentation of petitions. Appointment of select committees. Reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Banks and Trust Companies Regulation Act to provide for the regulation of executive entities by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and for matters incidental thereto.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Banks and Trust Companies Regulation Act to provide for the regulation of effective entities by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and for matters incidental thereto. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Banks and Trust Companies Regulation Act to provide for the regulation of executive entities by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and for matters incidental thereto.
Further first reading of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to amend the Executive Entities Act to provide for the regulation of certain executive entities by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and for matters incidental thereto.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a first time and tabled. A bill for an act to amend the Executive Entities Act to provide for the regulation of certain executive entities by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and for matters incidental thereto. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Executive Entities Act to provide for the regulation of certain executive entities by the Central Bank of the Bahamas and for matters incidental thereto.
Further first reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our colleagues in the gallery. You will see we are very distinguished and have great decorum in this place. And so you will not be disappointed, I'm sure. Good morning again. Today I rise for the second reading of the mining bill. The mining bill will provide for a legal basis for the private onshore and offshore mining of aggregates, of aragonite, sand, salt, other construction-related materials that are intended for commercial application. Effectively, any mineral or resource out of our ground or under our waters will be regulated now pursuant to this piece of legislation. The Bahamas is not considered a mineral-rich jurisdiction in the traditional sense. Mining in the Bahamas is presently limited to aragonite, to cement, salt, sand, gravel, stone. However, uses for such minerals are wide and varied and include production of cement, glass containers, auto glass, for example. Many activities and many end products come about as a result of minerals that may be mined in the Bahamas. And this list continues to grow, continues to develop as the market fluctuates, as new products come on stream. And historically, while these minerals have been prospected and exploited by investors, who have been granted concessions to do so, these investors in the Bahamas currently are not subject to any legal, fiscal, or regulatory framework. It is a significant void within our regulatory environment as a jurisdiction. Rather, mining concessions, as we may know, are granted on a case-by-case basis by central government. The mining or extractive industry, as it's referred to, is rather unique. Mining activities often utilize public land, which can be contested. Sites are often located in remote areas, which require infrastructure development. I'm sure my colleague from Grand Bahama will speak that in instances, certain sites are close to residential communities that cause a host of issues in and of themselves. Sites often pose risks to the environment and ecologically sensitive areas, and frankly, worker safety in these operations is also a concern. As a result, the imposition of a legal framework which balances the competing interests while protecting the rights and communities and individuals, while preserving the environment and the use of finite resources in our jurisdiction, and recognizing the national interest in exploiting mineral wealth is of particular importance. These are all elements that must be balanced together when you talk about mining or extraction activities in our jurisdiction. Under our administration's economic plan, the proper exploitation of natural resources is proposed as an avenue to diversify our country's economy, to create jobs, to create a more inclusive economic framework for the benefit of Bahamians. The government's economic plan also proposes the utilization of a modern sovereign wealth regime to receive revenue generated through natural resource development. Under the provisions of this bill we debate today, not only will a mining industry be established, but the revenues of such industry are proposed to be allocated to a specific subfund under the National Investment Fund Act, which we passed earlier in our administration. This also ensures the proper custody and the proper management of public revenues that are derived from the mining industry, and adds an element of transparency to the whole process. Sustainability of industry and best practices are key components of the bill, which has been developed with the technical assistance from the Commonwealth Secretariat Technical Assistance Program. The consultancy has provided the required technical insight into the global extractives industry and international best practices. And they help provide advice on international best practices in some of the following areas, such as establishing the mining authority itself and identifying what its key functions are. So the actual regulatory body is part of their advice. They advise on the creation of a licensing and eligibility framework for authorization to actual mine. Advise on creating an environmentally sustainable mining practice with robust oversight. One of the key factors in which they provided advice was how do you set up a royalty or a revenue framework that gave the flexibility for a government to negotiate different types of revenue models while ensuring that the state interest and the profitability was preserved. And finally, the Commonwealth Secretariat, this is an important part as well, advised on decommissioning of the mines in an environmentally sensitive manner. Mining activity comes to an end. Under the current regime, which really isn't a regime, there is nothing that speaks about how you decommission these mines. We may hear from the representative in Grand Bahama as the mine there that I'm sure he's going to speak of is approaching the end of its useful life. Well, what are the obligations of the company doing this mining activity to properly decommission that in an environmentally sensitive manner when they have finished extracting their aggregate. I want to personally thank the Commonwealth Secretariat for their assistance in structuring this framework and the legislation. Additionally, we have also at the Attorney General's Office performed a global benchmark of regulatory frameworks all across the globe, because we also wanted an understanding of how other countries set up their framework, in countries that may not be part of the Commonwealth, countries that we may be more akin to in size, in geography, in development. And so we performed a comprehensive global benchmark as well on the approaches to regulating the mining sector, to ensuring we were creating a regime that was fit for purpose, but also consistent with international best practices. So under the proposed mining regime in this bill, a Department of Mining will be established under the Ministry of Environment. The department will be managed by an appointed director who will be responsible for licensing and the renewal functions of a license, will be responsible for periodic review and audit functions of the licensee, and overall the general administration and receipt of statutory fees, levies, royalties from mining operations in the country. The proposed regime also intends to establish a proper cadastry office, noting the specific geographical location, so there will be a tracking mechanism and a registry as part of this, where you track the specific geographic locations for the mining activities. You track all of the mining operators and where they've been granted their concession rights. And this department will be responsible for maintaining this register of all persons holding mining licenses in the Bahamas and the permits issued by the department. This register will be available for public inspection to ensure transparency in relation to persons and entities granted their authorization to mine. This is a very important point, because we frequently hear from the Bahamian public that there's mining activities going on throughout the country, in certain instances primarily sand mining, and questions on the transparency. Do they hold a license? Are they in the area in which they hold their license? Are they allowed to conduct the scale of activities that they're doing? And there's no transparency under the current regime that will allow an interested party to be able to make these inquiries and get an answer. So this is an example of transparency that is intended to provide confidence to the process, confidence to the Bahamian people that they have an ability to know what is going on in their country, and the confidence that when they make the inquiry, they will have an understanding of where the mineral rights that are part of this sovereign nation of who they are citizens of are being undertaken appropriately and with the responsibility of a regulatory regime that's appropriate. A critical component of the legislation is the revenue generation model and public-private partnership opportunities that would exist between the mining operators and the government itself. Under this regime, the government will be entitled to receive revenue generated through royalties, through levies, through profit-sharing arrangements, even through state participation in the activity. All of this flexibility is built into the regime for the government. The contractual terms and conditions of these arrangements with licensees are proposed to be negotiated with the mining operators by way of a mining agreement. So there would be a separate mining agreement, a commercial agreement, that is to be entered into when somebody is granted a license. We have prepared a draft mining agreement template for the government to utilize in these negotiations. And this draft agreement will form the basis of all agreements with mining operators in the country. Structuring The economic benefit and conditions in this way allows the government the flexibility in negotiating terms, imposing additional oversight measures or imposing additional fiscal obligations relative to the scale, to the size, and the projected profits of a mining operation. We may say, for example, somebody wants to come in and mine aragonite. And we'll say, well, you know, that's a very sensitive issue. The government would actually want to be an equity participant in that transaction, and that's the only way we will grant the license. This bill gives the government that flexibility. We have high volume mining in the country, that is of sand. We may be comfortable with saying we'll give you the license and only take a royalty. Give us a percentage of the gross, for example, 10% of the gross revenue, or a fixed royalty per ton. The bill allows the government the flexibility to do that. So the fiscal considerations are very important in this, and you want to be able to have the flexibility depending on the scale and the size and the type of mining activities. Colleagues, while the economic benefit of developing your mining industry is clearly evident, the environmental impact associated with the extractive industry is an especially important consideration that is raised in the bill, and it's very explicit. An appropriate balance must be struck between development on one side and preservation on the other. After all, we only have one country. And the sensitivities of an archipelagic country like the Bahamas are magnified because every island has its environmental sensitivities. We're not just talking about one landmass or one area. We're talking about 700 islands and keys, plus all of the waters in between. So you must be able to strike an appropriate balance. Under the bill we debate today, environmental management plans and environmental impact assessments must be prepared in accordance with the current environmental laws in force in the Bahamas. So we're not running parallel processes here. That doesn't make any sense. You have a Department of Environmental Planning and Protection with the technical expertise to deal with the environmental matters. You have a current legislative and regulatory reform regime on the environment. This bill ensures that both run in parallel. And so you're getting the expertise from both departments. These will be required to be submitted to the authority as a condition precedent to granting the mineral right. And I want to be clear, yes, they are submitting it to the mining authority, but only after they've complied with the existing environmental regulations, which requires a certificate of environmental compliance issued by the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection. This will ensure that proper assessments are carried out pursuant to the laws of the Bahamas, and management plans are prepared for each and every mining area. This avoids overmining in an unsustainable way, unsustainable industry practices, and takes into account, frankly, what is the most significant part of our economic model, but our tourism product. You wouldn't want big mining ships in the middle of one of the key tourism destinations. Doesn't make any sense. So we have those sensitivities as well. In addition, the bill requires mining operators to perform proper decommissioning and rehabilitation procedures and provides financial guarantees to the government to ensure these obligations are met. So it's only a promise, right? That doesn't work. We could require the operator to post a bond to cover the anticipated expenses of decommissioning. So if they go out of business, or they just pick up and leave because they have no more mining or extractives to take out of the seabed or our islands, then we have a bond that will secure the decommissioning and cleanup exercise. Because, you know, these guys, they pick up and leave sometimes. Yep. Left you holding the bag. No, we got their bag. We got their bag. Another important component of the bill is the obligation of mining operators to give priority to local content and value addition. What that means is priority to Bahamian interests in their commercial operations must be given as part of their application procedure and incorporated into their operations. The bill prescribes mining operators give preference to the employment of Bahamian citizens and develop and submit plans which detail how these policies will be implemented. Further, mining operators are required to give priority to Bahamian goods and service providers to the extent that they can. So, for example, if you need to truck the aggregate across the island, priority must be given to Bahamian truckers as service providers to support that activity. That's in the legislation. Additionally, the bill contains provisions relative to the power of the government to impose requirements, which will be found in the mining agreement, for mining operators to establish processing and refining facilities for excavated minerals. So some of these products have to be processed. Have to be processed. And the bill provides specific framework and requirements on how that is to be managed. So it's not just taking it out of the ground. Right? It's the process. We are confident, we are absolutely confident that the structure of the mining bill will provide for best practices in mining regulation, which, as I had said, is a void in our environmental sustainability as a country. It doesn't exist right now. And a regulatory responsibility when it comes to natural resources. Madam President, I mentioned that we have prepared a template mining agreement that will be the basis of all mining licenses and arrangements entered into in the Bahamas. The mining agreement will detail the term, the tenure of the arrangement with the licensee, the scope of the grant of rights, so what have we given them, what is the scope that they can do, as well as the negotiated financial arrangement with the government. All of that will be embedded in the mining agreement. This scope will also detail the surface land rights that the mining operator has. So the mining operator would have to have certain land rights in order to do the mining. That may be private ownership, that may be a private lease, or that might be government land. And so the mining agreement will have to detail the scope of the land rights. The agreement also sets the requirements for the licensee to commence operations. So you can't just get a license and say, okay, I'm going to go drill in the ground, right? You have to have the agreement, and the agreement has to detail those arrangements. For example, prior to commencing operations, the licensee must submit the following documents to the minister. So he may have been given approval in principle, entered into negotiations for a mining agreement, but in order to commence, he must provide the following: a feasibility study report. So we have to know if the activity is actually feasible, right? The report on the environmental impact assessment, the social impact assessment and action plan. Grand Bahama, you listening? The social impact, how it affects the people nearby the mining operation. The environmental management plan must be presented to the minister, as well as a report on the potential for minerals and the benefit within the Bahamas of the minerals that are being extracted. So we have aggregate mining in the country, right? A lot of it's done in Grand Bahama, as we've been talking about. Well, we have a construction industry in the Bahamas as well, and that's what the aggregate is primarily used for. They would have to report to us how the Bahamas would benefit from their activities And in fact, there's a policy position of the government that they would have to sell aggregate to the Bahamas government or a Bahamian contractor at a discounted price to ensure that we have sufficient volume at an affordable price to be able to conduct our construction industry in the Bahamas. They can't just take all our aggregate and run and left us holding nothing. It happens all the time. Ain't gonna happen no more. Ain't gonna happen no more. I promise you that. The agreement will also detail the mining operations of the licensee, which would include a mining development plan. So the licensee has to provide the regulator a development plan of its mining operations. The mining plan, development plan, must include a detailed schedule for the performance of all planned activities identified in the feasibility study. So we got to know, what's your phasing? How are you going to roll it out? What's your time period for each stage? We must have a program of mining operations, and that requires the approval of the minister. We have to understand the details of the acquisition and the installation and construction of the mining infrastructure and related equipment. The provision for temporary construction workforce, any measures to mitigate negative social impacts, which includes housing, includes sanitation, includes public health measures. How is this going to affect all of that? And it also must include an estimated duration of key components of all planned activities to be performed. The agreement, the actual mining agreement, will also detail the inspection and the monitoring of the mining operations, as well as the environmental and regulatory obligations of the licensee on an ongoing basis. And as we discussed, the mining closure and post-mining operations must be detailed in the mining agreement to ensure there is responsible decommissioning of the operation itself. As I said, clearly, the template mining agreement that we've prepared at the Office of the Attorney General is robust. It incorporates international best practices of mining, and it gives the government the first step, head start to being able to roll this framework out. We will approach this responsibly, protecting the Bahamian interests and ensuring the licensee operates in a responsible manner. I would like to touch on one additional point regarding the mining bill and the obligations contained therein. Section 4 of the bill provides that the minister shall be in consultation with relevant stakeholders to develop and cause to be implemented a national mining policy. The national mining policy. It is an obligation on the minister. It's not permissive. He must do it. And that mining policy is intended to set out the global framework of how the government is going to approach mining activities in the country. The national mining policy will apply to offshore and onshore mining operations. And the goal of this mining policy is intended to protect the marine and terrestrial environment from adverse impacts of mining. As I said, we only got one country. We only got one ocean. Fewer and fewer fish in our sea. Senator, you been fishing? No? The mahi running. The mahi running. You eating on mutton fish. Mahi running. I had some good mahi this weekend. It also ensures that all mine sites are rehabilitated to acceptable standards. The policy will provide an avenue for foreign and domestic investment. So what is the policy of the government? This will define it when a large mining operation comes into the Bahamas, and where's the Bahamian participation? And that can come in a variety of forms. And the mining policy is intended to prevent illegal mining in the country. Through the assistance of the Commonwealth Secretariat, we've prepared a draft mining policy for the minister's consideration. The mining policy, we got a head start on all of this. It's in draft. The minister has an obligation to publicly consult. Obligation. This mining policy is intended to set out guiding policy principles that will govern the sector. The policy then sets out mining sector policies and strategies, which it will address in detail. This includes development and enhancement of a mineral sector knowledge base. We have to understand, we have to have some understanding ourselves on why these people in our country digging up our country. How does it affect us? What is the knowledge base to it? How do we understand the components of this? Talks about the establishment of a robust legislative and regulatory framework. The policy was talk about development of strong institutional frameworks for mining operations. It speaks to the creation of a competitive commercial environment. Again, this is a commercial activity by all those who participate. It speaks to sustainable environmental management of mining operations and activities. It encouragement of Bahamian participation in the sector and enhancing minerals value action in the country. The policy will also detail the monitoring framework, its implementation, and the accountability of the licensees. I personally look forward to the completion of the mining policy by the Minister for the Environment and a robust public consultation. We could pass laws all day in this place, you know. The actual implementation of this regime is going to be fundamental in order to give the confidence to the marketplace on one hand, but confidence to the Bahamian people. To the Bahamian people who care about this, who understand the impact to our country. That we are serious about the regulation and the preservation of our natural resources. And to undertake the activity responsibly, with a focus on maximizing opportunities for Bahamians and opportunities for the Bahamas itself. That's the intent of what we do today. That's where the implementation has to take us. And it's going to take strong leadership to see it through. A new mining regime and regulatory environment is a significant move forward to bring our sector up to international best practices and standards and ensure whatever mining is done in the Bahamas, it's undertaken in a responsible way. And the mining bill accomplishes this goal. Yes, we may hear from the opposition. We may hear from them. I suspect we will. And they may claim that the framework for this regime began under their tenure. They may claim that, and that's true. That's true. That's true. The difference, however, between us and them, this is the difference between us and them. Just so Bahamian people understand. The difference between us, the Progressive Liberal Party, and them is they may have started a bunch of things. They may have started it all, but it took a PLP government to conclude the heavy lift, and see them through. You know, I was listening to the House of Assembly last week, and as was said in that other place, they talk the talk when they're in office. They think about it a lot when they're in office. So they talk and they think. And they're good at talking. They're good at talking. I mean, they have a poet as their leader. Of course they're good at talking. Right? And they're good at thinking. They're good at thinking. We on this side, however, a PLP government does and sees things through. All the way to the end. All the way to the end. They may claim to be a government of ideas. A government of ideas. But we are a government of action. We are a government of action. That is the difference between our two administrations. That's the difference. So when you want to look, we have, some 15 months to election or so? And when you look at the two regimes, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Two straight. That's what I heard from my friend. Two straight. Saxons claim that, right? Before I conclude, I would just like to foreshadow a couple of movements to the mining bill that we will consider in committee. We will propose a movement to Section 42 of the bill to provide clarity and flexibility on the prescribed fee structure, ensuring that the fee schedule is negotiated in the mining agreement and ensuring the option for negotiation of profit share arrangements. We will also propose a new Clause 68 that will set out a regime for a fixed penalty framework, or spot fines. This will allow for greater flexibility of enforcement by the Department of Mining, allowing for a penalty regime for noncompliance without having to take infractions to court for their determination. And lastly, we propose a new Section 71 as a transition and savings clause to ensure that currently authorized mining operations, those that are underway now pursuant to a case-by-case authorization, will be subject to the regulatory framework save for the tenure of their license and their financial arrangements. So we're not calling for a reset of those. But the actual regulatory mechanisms and functions that are spelled out in the bill, current licensees will have to abide by. This is intended to ensure that current licensees must abide by the framework, and we don't have a dual system in which we have a subset of licensees who don't fall under and a subset that do fall under. So it brings a clarity and a quality of treatment to all licensees. We believe this is good legislation. We believe it is timely. And we believe this will ensure that the natural resources of the Bahamas are properly monitored, that we have a proper understanding of what mining operations are undertaken in our country, and it is all done in a transparent and a first-class regulatory approach. With that, I move for the second reading of the Mining Bill 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Is there a second, though?
Mr. Chairman, as always, it is a pleasure to be back in this honorable chamber. I wish to also extend a warm welcome to the guests in the gallery today who are visiting the Bahamas for what is slated to be a week of dynamic events hosted by the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Network. Ladies, it is certainly an honor and a privilege to have you with us, and I look forward to networking with some of you or all of you throughout this week. Mr. Chairman, I rise today in full and unwavering support of the Mining Bill of 2023, a long overdue landmark piece of legislation that stands to transform the future of our country's management of its natural resources. The importance of this bill cannot be overstated. because for far too long we have operated without a comprehensive legal framework to govern mining. This absence has left our natural wealth vulnerable to exploitation, our environment exposed to degradation, and the Bahamian people deprived of their full benefits. Mr. Chairman, for the first time in our nation's history, we are moving beyond the piecemeal regulations that we've seen over the last 50 years to a single cohesive law that ensures the interests of the Bahamian people are protected, that companies are held accountable, and that our environment is safeguarded. For decades, mining and resource extraction in the Bahamas took place in a regulatory vacuum. We've seen it time and time again. Limestone quarries operated without sufficient oversight, damaging landscapes and threatening critical groundwater supplies. The harvesting of pine in our family islands left significant scars behind, like extensive deforestation, loss of wildlife habitats, and in some cases, destruction of indigenous plant species. Valuable resources like sand were extracted with minimal oversight, leading to beach erosion. In all of these cases, the benefit did not outweigh the cost to the Bahamian people. Mr. Chairman, these are not distant memories, these are ongoing lessons. They are a stark reminder of what happens when a country fails to regulate its own resources. Exploitation thrives while our people are left behind. While successive administrations may have recognized the gaps, decisive action is what is needed to prevent national assets from further slipping through our fingers. Today, I commend this administration, under the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Philip Davis, for taking decisive action to fill a legal void that has persisted for over 50 years by bringing forward the mining bill. While others delayed, discussed, and thought about it, and often criticized, this administration acts. Mr. Chairman, this bill is not just timely, it is transformative. Allow me to highlight just a few of its important features because the AG has done a marvelous job at getting into the details of the bill. But firstly, it establishes a clear, structured licensing system to prevent reckless operations by requiring companies to meet strict environmental, technical, and financial standards before they can mine. It protects the environment by mandating that environmental impact assessments and restoration plans are in place for every mining project. It ensures that Bahamians receive fair economic returns through royalties, fees, and stronger auditing and reporting obligations, finally guaranteeing that Bahamian resources yield Bahamian benefits. The bill also prioritizes Bahamian labor and entrepreneurship, ensuring local participation and community investments. It sets minimal health and safety standards, protecting workers from exploitation and unsafe practices. And finally, it increases transparency and accountability, requiring public registers of mining licenses and contracts to ensure that no deals are made in the dark. Madam President, history shows us the cost of inaction: lost resources, environmental damage, and missed opportunities. But today, with the mining bill, we take control of our destiny. We say that the days of exploitation without accountability are over. We say that the wealth of the Bahamas belongs to the Bahamian people. We say that we will manage our resources sustainably for ourselves, for our children, and for future generations. For too long, we have allowed others to profit from the riches God placed in our soil and our seas, while Bahamians were left to pick up the scraps. Today, with this bill, we say no more. We stand for a future where Bahamian resources benefit Bahamian people and where exploitation is replaced with empowerment. Madam President, today we do more than just pass a law. We correct decades of injustice. We chart a new course, and we make history. I fully support the Mining Bill of 2023 as it is an important and sensible step forward for the Bahamian people. Madam President, as I conclude, I wish to recognize that we are at the end of the month of April, and we are embarking and entering into the new month of May, which is globally observed as Brain Tumor Awareness Month. This month reminds us of the importance of education, early detection, and swift treatment in the fight against brain tumors. Madam President, it was at the very young age of 33 that my father would have been diagnosed with his first brain tumor. And he would have battled brain tumors for 11 years before unfortunately succumbing to brain cancer at the young age of 42. I say, Madam President, that it is early detection, early recognition of the signs, thanks to my mother, and of course, early treatment that allowed my father to be with us for as long as he was. My hope is that we continue to raise awareness and that we remember those who are fighting and those like my father who courageously battled this disease. May God continue to bless the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, this administration, and all who have been called to serve the Bahamian people. And may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable J.Ann Major, for your contribution. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to regulate mineral prospecting, mining, and related matters. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Thank you, Madam President. The chaplain advised this morning that we be courteous. I know that we should always work in the interest of others. But the Attorney General makes it so difficult to do so. Right? I want to welcome our colleagues from the Commonwealth Parliamentary Caucus. It's good to have you in the Bahamas, and I'm sure you've never been in a parliament so well behaved. It's good to have you here. I'm particularly pleased to see Deputy Speaker Williams from the Turks and Caicos. I claim my birthright to the Turks and Caicos, where my grandfather was born. I was there when you opened your parliamentary session on the invitation of your Premier Missick, who's a good friend of mine. It's good to have you here. I also want to begin, Madam President, by extending condolences to the family of Valerie Hardy. Valerie Hardy, she was a Pinder before marrying a teacher from the UK, Jacques Hardy, who predeceased her. Yeah, you remember Jacques? He started gardening after he retired from education. He taught me a little bit of English. He was one of my favorite teachers. And so we lost Valerie yesterday. And so the Pinder family and the Hardy family from Sandy Point, they mourn. She was I think, the best friend that my mother-in-law had. They used to brag about going fishing around Jim Hunt Bay and those places. And so she will be sorely missed. I'd also like to extend condolences to the family of Nicola Smith-Roll from Little Abaco, the Mills family, whom we also lost on the weekend. Madam President, I heard the Attorney General, my learned colleague and my learned friend, say that they act and we talk and think. Well, you know, sometimes it is important to think before you act. Right? Because normally policy precedes legislation, not the other way around. So you should have perhaps considered consulting before coming with this legislation. Which should have been your, listen man, you've had your time, let me have mine, right? Which should have been your proper course of action before coming here and accusing us of talking. I was in church yesterday, you know. I was in church yesterday, and another man from Abaco, he preached. Carrington Pinder, Reverend Dr. Carrington Pinder, the Right Honorable, Golden Gates. I represented the leader. And he said something similar to which the Attorney General asserted, to which I could not take umbrage in church. But I can certainly take umbrage here. He said that there was not much similarities between us, differences between us and the other side, the F&M and the PLP. Well, we would not have brought legislation before we had a policy. That is one difference. That is one difference. That is one difference. Madam President, no fulsome or responsible debate on legislating mining in the Bahamas can be taken seriously without mentioning mining's deleterious effect or impact on the environment. According to environmentalists, mining results in the loss of vegetation, vegetation cover, mass destruction of water bodies, loss of biodiversity, land use changes, and food insecurity is increased. It adds social vices and conflicts, high cost of living and air pollution and more. And, you know, for an administration which has spent $60 million traveling the world talking about climate change, it is amazing how quick, globe-trotting talking about climate change, it is amazing how quickly and warmly they embrace these things that are adverse to a conducive and good keeping of the environment. Less than 4 years. It's antithetical. It's antithetical. That they embrace so readily initiatives that oppose a sustainable environment. Why would we agree to land space flights in the most pristine, arguably most beautiful waters in the Bahamas, in the world, Exuma, where Scott Kelly, an American astronaut who was orbiting the Earth, looked down and said, it is a light that extends even onto space from Exuma. You should go to Exuma if you get an opportunity. I am from Abaco and we have beautiful beaches, but I give to Exuma. I give to Exuma because the beaches there are second to none, right? And so the irony here is rich. That we would agree to land space shuttles from SpaceX in the most pristine environment of our country. And I don't believe, since we had the incident the other day with the one that crashed. Yeah, I know they're unrelated, but we're still waiting on an impact assessment. From SpaceX, we're waiting on this study. SpaceX, who could put a man in a capsule and put him on Mars. And we've been waiting on this EIA, this impact assessment of their crash landing in the Exumas for the past, 6 months? 6 weeks? I find that amazing, that we don't know the impact of the crash. You know, I find that amazing.
You're convoluting the two things.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. Well, tell him stop speaking to me. And let me speak to you, because I will answer him every time. There were two instances. There were two instances, right? I'm not talking about the flight that we claim we want tourism for, which I find oxymoronic. In the first instance, that we have the most pristine waters and beaches in the world, and we want to go explore space and have them land rockets in Exuma. But I'm talking about the one that took off from Texas and crashed. Pieces all of it, debris of it all over the Bahamas. Right? It is our responsibility to consider any proposals for the resource development in the context of climate change. That's our responsibility. Which threatens rising seas and more intense storms in years to come. That's what the Prime Minister said during his contribution to this very same debate on the 2nd of April, 2025. I agree with the Prime Minister. I survived Hurricane Dorian along with my colleagues here from Grand Bahama. Therefore, we who act as guardians of our natural resources and patrimony in the interest of generations of Bahamians yet unborn, we are obligated to protect our God-given assets for the benefit of our children and their children's children. As I remember church, the Bible says that a good man leaves an inheritance. We are a very religious country. We're not afraid to talk about Jesus. Some parliaments in the world can't say nothing but Jesus, But we love to talk about Christ. In the Bahamas, we literally believe that it is in him that we breathe, move, and have the essence of our being. We believe that. We really believe that. So a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. It's not always in monies or land. It's in these assets that we are the guardians of. We have no right, no matter how motivated, to sell their birthright in the interest of expediency, be it political, economic, or otherwise, without full consideration of the impact upon their future. Madam President, we must hand our children a country which they have more than a fighting chance of surviving in, but a country in which they own their God-given patrimony to the benefit of all Bahamians. There must be no tolerance for embracing short-term gains as we risk destroying the future of our children. To date, the most important assets we have are our marine land resources. We must stop at no end to preserve and protect them. There must be, as much as practicably possible, an amicable, and the AG alluded to this, marriage between development and sustainability. And that's the question that continues to plague the entire world, where development and sustainability they seem to be natural enemies to each other. I remember we wanted to do a development in Hole in the Wall, of which you will be familiar. And I had some environmentalists whilst I was, member of Parliament for North Abaco, saying to me, look here, you're going to go and disturb bonefish habitats. Yeah, I think they did. They were talking about Treasure Key or something. I don't know. Okay, yeah. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to ensure that we protect those bonefish habitats. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. Because, that's a natural breeding ground for the Abaco parrot. Right? No, he's talking good sense now, so we just start talking good sense now, right? He's talking good sense now. We're talking good sense.
It doesn't work like that, Senator. Let's follow the rules.
Madam President, it is...
No. Senator.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator, can you please speak to the chair?
Yes,
it doesn't work like that. Thank you.
Madam President, it is well established that mining is not inherently sustainable due to its resource-intensive nature and potential for significant environmental impacts, negative impacts. Madam President, I've read that by its very nature, mining disrupts the natural environment. Experts tell us that the mining industry is actively working towards more sustainable practices because the fundamental activity of extracting finite resources presents challenges. Hence, sustainability in the mining industry remains very complex and remains a work in progress. Madam President, it is also mind-boggling that an administration like this one, which appears challenged by transparency and accountability, challenged, will abrogate unto itself such extraordinary powers as have been given to the minister responsible for protection and conservation and management of the environment. Challenge this administration is the transparency and accountability. But you're going to take, if you look at this act, and I took my time and went through it today, and I marked every place where someone has to see the minister responsible. And I got tired marking the spots. I really, you got to see the minister about a license. You got to see the minister about this. You got to see the minister about that. there are other practices in the world that we could have engaged, rather than abrogating unto itself the cabinet, or through the Kaltona principle, some official in the government who has a responsibility to the minister to have oversight, and to hear the word oversight mentioned in the same sentence as the government is almost laughable to me. Governments can't oversee nothing. We've had challenges with that in the Bahamas, both administrations. No, I don't cast aspersion on this side alone. Both administrations have had challenges with oversight. Madam President, environment. Madam President, management of the environment has seen, in this case, I believe might be jeopardized with a minister being responsible for its oversight. I mean, I think it's conflicting interest, personally. So, Madam President, it is contradictory, at least to me, that the minister with responsibility for protecting the environment would also be charged with managing its degradation. So how are you going to protect something, and then in the same token, you're going to go give people licenses and free way to destroy it? That's oxymoronic in the least, in my mind. Instead of relinquishing so much power to the minister and the cabinet, perhaps we might have considered the establishment of a mining commission, such as seen in several other countries. That's because you acted without setting out your policy and thinking. Is that what they did? They acted without thinking? Without consulting? They're now in the process of consulting after they've come to this place and went to the other place. Madam President, our regional counterparts in Jamaica and Guyana, they have mining commissions and related entities responsible for regulating, managing their mining industries. Ghana, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, they all have similar commissions. In my mind, it takes away, this air that the government is responsible for everything, the oversight, the management, the looking after who does this wrong and who does that wrong. The commission will advise the government on things that ought to be going on in such an industry. Madam President, mining commissions are responsible for, among other things, issuing and granting mining licenses, overseeing exploration and mining activities, conducting inspections of mines and the environment, managing mineral trade and operations, advising the minister on mineral-related matters. I hope we could revisit this, and we will revisit this when we become the government next. Couple of things we have to change. But there's only three of us here. There's only three of us here. But there are hundreds of thousands of us out there that are on that day. A mining commission, let's stay focused here. A mining commission would have served us better. Yeah, we do, because yeah. We know why. And we know what motivates you to do. We always know what motivates you to do. We always know what motivates you to do. It motivated you to go down to West End, Grand Bahama with 183 million.
Order.
183 million, no bid. That's what motivates you. And other things. Instead, Oban never happened, man. Never happened. File was lost, they say. Never happened. Never happened. Instead, what we see, Madam President.
Never happened. That's signature.
Instead, what we see, Madam President, in Part 4 of this bill, it provides for a mining cadastry. A mining cadastry register in Clause 3. So what we have in place of a mining commission appears to me a conglomerate of mining secretaries, cadastry. That will be a registry for where, as if we're going to have 1 million of them going on in this little country at one point. For where mining is being conducted, a registry. We're going to have a director to correct, listen to this. A director, according to clause, what is it, 34? Clause 34? We're going to have a director to correct mistakes in the registry. That's, in my mind, is a waste of paper. To write something like that in a bill. It's a waste of paper to write a director to correct mistakes in the register. A director.
The single largest license holder of a Bahamian is one of your fellas.
In law, he quite well knows in law, we call that ad hominem. When you cannot attack the argument, you attack my learned friend. You attack personally. Now he comes to me and tells me about one of our people. But we all got people. We all got people. Your people are the biggest people in the country. Yeah, they are. They are Bahamians. They are Bahamians. Red or yellow, black or white, they are precious in our sight. In our sight, they are precious, Madam President. I want to finish this, but to put in a bill. How much time we got here? But to put in a bill, a director, no less than a director, to correct mistakes in the register, I find particularly odious and a waste of time. A director, this is another one. A director to cause, this is clause 35. A director to cause cadastral survey map to be maintained instead of a commission. And national mining zones as it appears at clause 36. Madam President, clause 32A of the bill provides that where any extraction of a mineral is used directly in construction works authorized under heads of agreement with the government, oversight of heads of agreements. Okay, so here's the point I want to make. Here's the point I want to make, right? We have the Economic Council on which the cabinet sits, right? People come to us with their plans for investment. And so at the end of the day, we agree heads of agreements. But one of the challenges that we have been having, is that we don't have good oversight of these agreements. It is an administrative deficiency that we need to fix, both of us, all of us, each of us, right? Because we can have in a heads of agreement that, just say for instance, a fellow wants to do a small hotel or something. And entertainment in the hotel and the heads of agreement, we should say, should go to Bahamian entertainers, right? Who you all like to make fun of because you all don't like creatives. Always talking about how our leader is a poet. It's good. It's good to be a poet. A poet is a thinker. It's not bad to be a poet. What are we telling our children? That they ought not aspire to be poets? Or musicians? Or creatives? But you assert it. You assert it every time you speak about our leader, you assert it. You assert it. So if I have in the heads of agreement, Minister Halkidas, my friend, if I have in the agreement, right, that there should be Bahamian musicians, right? And then I put in the agreement as well, just as an example, that there should be on display Bahamian art by creatives, Bahamian creatives, or sculptors by Bahamians. And you go to these establishments after they've been built and business is ongoing, and you hear music from Jamaica, reggae, Puerto Rican straight. I don't have a problem with reggae music, but I have a problem with that. Because I believe that if you have a heads of agreement with the Bahamas government, the Economic Council, and we agree that you have Bahamian music ought to be played when they come here from Canada and Australia. But take some cake because you home, right? When they come here from Canada and Australia and other places, they won't hear Elon Moxie, God rest his soul. Huh? Yeah, when they won't hear Ancient Man, right? They won't hear Phil Stubbs. Hit the nail right, boy. Hit it on the head. Strive with all your might, boy, while the iron is red. And then he says, and I say to the opposition, persevere. That's what he says. Persevere. Right? One example of that, I think, is you walk into places and you see all manner of art from all over the world. When people come to us, they want to, and so I say all of that to say this. We have to seriously look at setting up a committee or an agency or however we want to do it, to look at how we come behind these heads of agreement and ensure that these investors are living up to their responsibilities. Because they don't do it. I don't want to use one as an example. I won't call their name. You whistle and I'll point. I read the heads of agreement in my constituency, formally. I went into their establishment and I asked them, I said, where's the Bahamian art that you should have here? No one is enforcing it. And I fear they are currently operational. Yeah.
Which constituency are you talking about?
Yeah.
The one you're running in now, or the one
No,
you're representing?
no, the one.
Why are you trying to run it?
No, I said,
Which constituency?
I know you are a lexicon, I know you are a linguist. So I know you don't have any problem with the English language. I know that for a fact. So I said where I formerly was. That's what I said. That's what I said. And they had no Bahamian art that I could see visibly on display in the place where it ought to have been. And so I fear that when we mention heads of agreement in this bill, and we don't have proper oversight, to go behind the heads of agreement is a waste of time. I believe when we do that, in the wrap-up, it'd be nice. I think to resolve this problem, we should establish a group with the sole responsibility of ensuring that agreements embedded in heads of agreements with government are adhered to. It's a very, very simple thing to do. I don't know why we failed to do it. And I take responsibility for our failure as a member of the former cabinet. I believe this will mitigate abuse by unscrupulous investors who fail to follow mutually agreed positions. Madam President, finally, and I say finally, an F&M administration, the next F&M administration, and not so long from now, they keep saying 15 months, and I don't necessarily believe that. And not so long from now, the next F&M administration will repeal and replace the so-called National Investments Fund Act. Because we don't believe it serves the interests of the Bahamian people. No, listen, man, listen. You're gonna have your way. Let us have our say, right? That's the way it works, right? We believe that it should be replaced with a best-in-class sovereign wealth fund, right? Bahamians don't feel this stuff, man. National Investment Fund. What do we do with it? We have a family island investment fund that we put nothing in. This, money's from the moorings thing the other day that you canceled. Rightly so. Should have canceled that. That was incredible. That was incredible, that mining thing. Madam President, you realize they put moorings all over Elizabeth Harbor where we just had the family island regatta. You have been to Exuma? And without environmental impact assessment, without consultation, everybody knows, the Attorney General knows that which case was that? Which required the Bahamians to be consulted. Baker's Bay. Will it? Will it? Will it? Will it? Okay. Everybody knows that it requires consultation before you go into a community and make drastic changes. Everybody knows that, right? And so we will replace that fund, and we will take monies from mining, right? From moorings, because moorings is a good idea. I mentioned it in here before. You remember? I don't know if you remember when we were doing the debate on the voting register, and I indicated that moorings are sustainable, so that we don't have these boats coming around and anchoring on our reefs and destroying them. Incidentally, we have a barge at Fowl Key, and a tug at Fowl Key, just now. You aware of it? Well, you need to move it. You need to move it. It's in court, and so and it's sub judice, so I wouldn't have much to say about it. But what I'd like to say is I think that the government should find some monies, Minister Alcides, and move it before it completely destroys the reef, right? It's destroying our reef and the sea park in central Albuquerque, in the Keys, right? And I get calls about it all the time because there's a lady who lives on the north side who says to me that, Darren, I'm afraid that this thing is going to break loose at some point and come straight ashore into my property. She lives near the beach. Let's find some money and move it. And then let's go to court, right? We got smart lawyers in this country. We got the best lawyers in the AG's office. We brag about it all the time. That's why I cut my teeth. Right? We got some of the brightest minds, and Justice Lauren Klein and I were able to prosecute the Formosa Falcon. You remember the Formosa Falcon that went aground or anchored in a reef down off Grand Bahama, off Freeport? Well, that was the first case we prosecuted. So you could hire us and we could do it for you. But in this case, in Abaco, I'll do it for free. But get it done. It needs to be moved, and it needs to be moved immediately. It's been there now over a year. It's been there now over a year. And I only mention it because I got some calls on it. Yeah, and I got to advocate for Abaco. Anywhere in Abaco, that's my constituency. I'm Abaconian, born and bred. Born and bred. Yeah, this one here from the BNT. Bahamas National Trust and Partners call for immediate action on vessels aground on the coral reef in Abaco. Let's get it done. We can't afford to have breeding ground for our fish and our carbon habitat and all the rest of it. You're going to get it done? Yeah, somebody stand up and say we can get it done. And I said right now. They stand up and say we're going to get it done, and people in Abaco are listening. And you remember you're going to go knock on their doors shortly? Those of you who knock on doors?
can have our fella tell them.
Those of you who know, your fella is. So, Madam President, I thank you and my colleagues for your indulgence, and with that, I rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, Darren, bring it. Don't sing it.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Darren Henfield, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Good afternoon, Senate colleagues.
Points I covered. What about those?
who did an, who did an awesome job.
What about those?
Who did an awesome job in laying the points out.
Come to do, you can do.
Madam President, as it lays the groundwork for the development for a thriving mining industry. This bill holds the promise of stimulating new businesses, Madam President, ventures, creating jobs, and expanding the horizon on Bahamian entrepreneurship. It provides a solid foundation, Madam President, for the future of our economy, facilitating the emergence of industries that will contribute to both the Bahamas, public and private sectors. The government, continuing on its mandate from the Bahamian people since the 2021 general election, must be commended for successfully moving this critical piece of legislation through the lower house and now bringing it before us for consideration. Again, some of us think about it, some of us ponder, and others get it done.
Wow.
So I would like to say kudos to this administration, which remains dedicated to delivering progress for the Bahamian people. However, I must express my concern, Madam President, at the level of cynicism and negativity from the opposition as they attempt to derail the progress of this legislation promises.
We telling you what week.
I was particularly disheartened to hear one member of the opposition, intoxicated by the urge to stoke doubt, spread bleak, exaggerated scenarios about the impact of this bill.
Talk about a poet.
The opposition, in their discomfort, seems intent, Madam President, on undermining anything positive the government attempts to do. It is evident that their political strategy now revolves around negativity, doubting the progress we have made, and spreading an atmosphere of pessimism. Let me be clear, Madam President. This is not the way forward. The Bahamian people have shown time and time again that they are wary of obstructionist politics and of parties who only seem, Madam President, to thrive on disruption rather than progress. We all know too well that the opposition is the party of stop, cancel, and review. Check the record. A formula that has led to national, economic, social setbacks in this country. The opposition approach has led to them coming across as rather bitter and angry, Madam President. They seem confused and a bit disingenuous, if you ask me. They have become the Free National Pessimist movement. Rather than providing solutions, they seek to tear down anything that might offer the Bahamian people a new hope for a better future. As leaders, it is not our responsibility to guide the Bahamian, it is our responsibility, to guide the Bahamian people towards economic opportunity, to help them to understand how they can seize the potential of industries like mining, and how they can work in an organized, sustainable way to maximize those benefits, Madam President. Madam President, we all remember the Oban deal that occurred under the opposition's watch.
No bond deal occurred under our watch.
In East Grand Bahama,
Point of order. Point of order.
Can you let me see, please? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren
Madam
Henfield.
Madam President,
Senators.
Madam President, the member is misleading.
But just wait, please, Senator. Picks up. Senator Henfield.
Gallery.
Senators on the floor, please.
Calm down, the gallery. Madam
Please
President,
proceed, Senator.
the member is misleading. No Oban deal happened on our watch. None. None.
Madam President,
Senator Henfield. Yes,
you would
proceed.
recall that the Free National Movement signed a heads of agreement for the Oban deal. And so he can, the member opposite can be very flowery with his words,
But the Bahamian people knew and they watched while fake signatures went on those agreements. Okay? So you can be flowery with your words, but the public knows
precisely
better.
why the deal never
Okay?
happened.
Madam
So,
President.
Madam President, the member is misleading. No Oban deal, I say again, happened on our watch.
I think the
The
member,
member just clearly elucidated why it didn't happen.
I think,
And I don't argue with him on that.
thank you,
But
Senator.
no Oban deal happened on our watch. In fact, there's no Oban in the Bahamas, as far as I recall.
I think the member sufficiently explained exactly what he meant. Can you please proceed, member?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Madam President. Madam President. Madam President.
I don't.
Madam President, I will leave that there. I will leave that there, and I will allow.
No, you need to withdraw that from that.
Order, order,
Withdraw that from that.
order,
That's not true.
order. Senator, please proceed. Thank
Madam
you.
President, Madam President, foreign developers were granted a
I don't
heads
know
of
what happened to
agreement
that. I can't
for an
do that.
oil refinery, despite a lack of adequate vetting and environmental consideration.
These 3 million on
The
road.
deal
What happened to that?
ignored the necessary safe.
Okay, so why is the Oban was approved?
Senators, order.
183
Senators,
were approved.
senators,
Why is Oban approved?
Senator, Senator Handfield, Senator Pender, please. We have a senator on the floor, and I need to hear him. Please. He's speaking, and no other senator should be speaking. That's the rules in the rule book.
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Y'all can clearly have this discussion during the lunch break.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Madam
Thank you.
President, the deal ignored the necessary safeguards to protect our precious water table, our wetlands, our animal habitats, and the surrounding communities. This failure to act responsibly on behalf of the Bahamian people and our natural resources speaks volumes about their approach to governance. Madam President, I will leave this there, and I will let the Bahamian people be the judge. Moreover, we saw this same neglect in the opposition's handling of the ill-fated Skyline Lakes and Prospect Ridge project, promising upper-middle-class housing and land sales without conducting proper scientific studies or acknowledging the importance of our water lenses and the natural topography. This, too, failed to materialize as the land titles were not in place and no due diligence was done. Let us not forget the reckless clearance of hills and forest under the previous administration projects like the cliffs at East Street and Independence Highway, where environmental impact studies were completely disregarded. This very same opposition that now raises concern about our mining legislation was the one that left the environment vulnerable to unnecessary destructions. Madam President, when I hear members of the opposition criticize this bill, I cannot help but to remind them of their own record on environmental neglect and reckless development under their tenure. It was business as usual, approving projects that prioritize foreign interests over preservation of Bahamian patrimony. They failed to recognize the dangers of unregulated mining, land excavation, dredging, which took place in the country at greater risk, especially in the context of climate change. And Madam President, in all fairness, Madam President, this has been going on in our country for time immemorial. But it's this government. It is this government. It is clear. It is this government that has the fortitude, to bring this legislation to bear. Now, Madam President, this government has taken a different approach. We have learned from mistakes, Madam President, of the past, and are committed to a mining industry that will be governed by checks and balances, transparency, and sustainability. The bill before us establishes a clear framework, Madam President, for responsible extraction of natural resources, one that ensures our resources are managed with the utmost care for the environment. This legislation not only ensures that the minerals in the Bahamas belong to the people, but also mandates that landowners receive market value for their land if it is acquired for mining purposes. This is a fair, just, and transparent process, Madam President. Furthermore, this bill reflects the government's recognition of the unique challenges we have faced as an archipelago. We are keenly aware of the importance of rigorous oversight and the need to be careful and responsible and manage our natural resources. The bill's provisions ensure that all mining operations are thoroughly vetted, monitored, and enforced. Madam President, I am particularly excited about the opportunities this bill presents for the young Bahamian business people, businessmen and women, through the Bahamas, through BAIC, of which I am which I serve as chairman. I've seen firsthand the enthusiasm of Bahamians from all walks of life, eager to start their businesses and take full advantage of the opportunities this legislation will bring. They are ready to build, innovate, and contribute to the growing economy, Madam President. I stand here confident that this mining bill is not just another government initiative. It is the start of a new era in the Bahamas, an era where the operations are regulated, an era where Bahamians, with a sense of pride and responsibility, lead the charge in building a sustainable, thriving mining industry. This bill protects the environment. It emphasizes on local ownership, and its commitment to long-term sustainability make it a win-win for all Bahamians. It speaks directly to the patriotic Bahamian who loves this land, who understands the delicate balance between economic growth, Madam President, and environmental preservation, and who will not be swayed by quick profit that comes at the cost of our country's future. Madam President, I am also proud that the bill incorporates extensive oversight mechanisms with a Mining Bureau provisions for the Minister and Director of Mining to ensure the industry operates according to the highest standard of environmental and public safety. While the opposition will no doubt continue with their doublespeak, offering smoke and mirrors rather than viable solutions, I am confident that the Bahamian people see through their efforts. The ownership of our minerals is in the hands of the Bahamas, and this bill ensures that the Bahamian people will benefit from these resources in a transparent, accountable, and sustainable manner, Madam President. Let us all recognize that this bill is more than just about mining. I reiterate, this bill is more than just about mining. It is about securing a future where Bahamians can benefit from their own resources, where we manage our land, our waters, and where we manage our resources responsibly. This is a new day for the Bahamas, and we are ensuring that the mining industry contributes to this national transformation. The Bahamian people trust us to make the right decisions, to build responsibly, and to ensure that future generations will inherit a nation that is not only economically vibrant, but also environmentally sound. Madam President, this mining bill is a step forward, not only for the mining industry, but for the future of the Bahamas. It is a bill that represents our commitment to progress, to the environment, and to the Bahamian people. Madam President, I fully support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. Madam President, I would like to thank the Attorney General and his team, for what they have brought before the House and we fully, again, support this legislation. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Barnett Ellis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, before I turn to the substantive part of my contribution, allow me first to extend a few tributes. First, I'd like to take a moment to pay tribute to His Holiness Pope Francis, who recently departed this life. Pope Francis was a tireless champion for the poor, a fearless advocate for mercy and justice, and a living embodiment of humility in leadership. His passing leaves a tremendous void, not only in the Catholic Church, which I'm a part of, but across the world, where his calls for peace, compassion, and stewardship of our planet resonated deeply. May his soul rest in peace and rise in glory. Secondly, I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to Commodore Dr. Raymond King, Commander of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. He has extended numerous courtesies to my family and I. His distinguished service to our nation has left an indelible mark on the fabric of our security forces. As he transitions to the next chapter of his life, I wish him every success and God's richest blessings. Thank you, Commodore, for your example of discipline, leadership, and patriotism. Thirdly, I'd wish to acknowledge Mrs. Abigail Bethel, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, member of Bethel Baptist Church. I had the privilege of sitting beside Mrs. Bethel during the Good Friday service this year. She was warm, engaging, and immediately embraced me and welcomed me to the Bethel Baptist family. Her birthday was last week. It is these national grandmothers who provide us comfort and reassurance, sometimes when we don't even realize we need it, and we are blessed by their presence. Fourthly, and certainly not least, I extend heartfelt congratulations to Team Bahamas on their historic 7th consecutive win at the Carifta Aquatics Championships. What an extraordinary display of teamwork, resilience, and national pride. I'm a proud swim mom, and I am a proud swim official. Beyond their dominant swims, our athletes demonstrated endurance, not just in the water, but through the long, grueling days of competition. The bonds they have formed on these trips are priceless. Congratulations to the swimmers, the coaches, Bahamas Aquatics, and the families who supported them. They say the law is a jealous mistress, but I'm learning that swimming is giving her some serious competition. Lastly, Madam President, I must congratulate the National Family Island Regatta Committee for a spectacular regatta weekend. Exuma was, as always, a gracious host, offering cool breezes, sparkling waters, great food, and friendly faces. Madam President, next year is their 70th regatta, and they have told me that they're pulling out all the stops. So I encourage everyone to get to Exuma next year for regatta, because Exuma is really sweet like that. Madam President, now to the matter at hand. The government recently tabled the mining bill, a bill that purports to modernize the mining industry in the Bahamas, strengthen regulatory oversight, and ensure the protection of the environment. It creates a framework for the issuance of mining license, imposes conditions on mining activities, and outlines penalties for non-compliance. Madam President, on paper, it sounds promising. But how can we trust this administration? We only need to rewind the tape to their initial handling of the SpaceX landings in the Bahamas. Last time I was in this honorable chamber, the Attorney General helpfully directed me and the Bahamian public to the new regulations governing space flight and reentry into the Bahamian airspace. Per those regulations, prior to the granting of a reentry license like the one that SpaceX needed to land their Falcon 9 rocket boosters, the Civil Aviation Authority needed to conduct an environmental analysis. So prior to the granting of the license and the letter of agreement granting permission for those 20 landings, an environmental impact assessment should have been done. But what has become the norm? NGOs in the space have said that they weren't consulted and expressed concern about the environmental impact. The government has released a report by SpaceX expert after the launch, but what did the initial environmental import commissioned by the authority say? And now the landings have been suspended. We do not know what the fee arrangement was. We do not know what the letter of agreement said. And we do not know what the initial environmental impact assessment said. Now, these groundbreaking, revolutionary leap, providing substantial economic advantages,
Senator Anfield, Senator Pitt.
have been.
Senators, there's a senator on the floor and I need to hear her, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Now, these groundbreaking, revolutionary leap providing substantial economic advantages has been unexpectedly paused. And I say unexpectedly because SpaceX has said that this pause will affect the trajectory of their launches and that they will have to work around and through the concerns. Madam President, if the groundbreaking, and I believe the AG called them benchmark regulations, had been followed, then why the abrupt pause? Madam President, the beauty of our environment, our notoriously beautiful sun, sea, and sand, fuel our #1 industry. Matters that impact our environment require transparency and compliance because damage to our primary economy driver would be devastating. Yet, they don't want to explain what happened with the moorings in Exuma. The MP did not know. The Crown lease was signed by the Prime Minister, but mum's the word. They refused to explain or even pretend to investigate what happened and how could they do it without approvals. As I have shown, this administration, while it preaches environmental awareness all around the world, fails to practice what they preach here at home. They refuse to be transparent and demonstrate sensitivity to environmental risk. We cannot trust them to make development decisions which won't adversely impact our seas. How can we trust them now with something so delicate as mining, something that, if mishandled, could devastate our land and waters permanently? Trust, Madam President, is earned by action and not by press releases. We were also promised in that glossy blueprint for change that electricity prices would be reduced after 100 days. 100 days. Yet, for more than 100 days after the election, Bahamians experienced higher electricity bills. Not lower, higher. And that's not fulfillment. That's the opposite of what was promised. We were given a temporary reduction. We were given a temporary reduction. And now, as a result of a secretive deal.
Order. Order. Senators, order. 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 Senators, let's be respectful to the senator on the floor. Thank you. Well then, Well, stand up on your feet and say what you have to say,
As I said,
and I will recognize you.
tell me when
I will recognize you.
tell me
Order.
when came down in 100.
Order.
Say it.
Order. Order.
Get up and call me a liar.
Order. Senators, if you have a point of order, please stand, and of course the president will recognize you. Please continue, Senator Michael Bonnet Ellis. Thank you.
Temporary reduction. And now, as a result of a secretive deal, a deal which remains a mystery to the public, it has been reported that electricity bills will not meaningfully decrease until 2027. Our bills were lower under the former hedge agreement. And before the senators opposite jump up out their seat like they have ants in their pants to lay blame at the feet of the previous administration, let me say this. This government has lost its credibility on explaining anything around the hedge agreement. The people no longer believe the spin. And just like they don't believe the entrapment speculation. And if this administration doesn't believe me, perhaps the Nassau Guardian can conduct a poll on the matter. I am certain that the results would tell a sobering story about the public's confidence or lack thereof in the narratives they peddle. This administration doesn't deliver governance. We are witnessing a get-rich scheme for their nearest and dearest, funded by the taxpayers. Madam President,
Madam President, on a point of order, I will not let that stand.
Wait.
I will not let
Senator Michael Bonnet, could you please resume your seat? Senator Ryan Pinder, what is the nature of your point of order, please?
She's flat out incorrect, the senator, and misleading the public. I will not tolerate in this place, she's misleading the public, and she's communicating untruth with respect to saying that this is a get-rich scheme for some of our supporters. That is highly objectionable in this place. That should be stricken from the record. She has no proof. And in fact, if she would read the energy reform policy correctly, she would see that we are actually buying power at 4.2 cents a kilowatt hour, much lower than can be produced by BPL, much lower than that they produce. And the fact that she can accuse and diminish the name of respectable Bahamians in this place with a side comment is inappropriate, Madam President, should be stricken from the record.
Senator Michael Bonnet Ellis, do you have any evidence to suggest with your statement regarding the get-rich-quick scheme?
Madam President, they have refused to provide any of the details.
That answers my point. If they have not provided the details, then you cannot make that a point. Exactly. So,
Madam President.
No. Before you proceed, I will strike from the record the statement you made with respect to get-rich scheme and whatever else you said in regards to that statement. Okay.
Madam
Stand
President,
up.
that was a
Thank you.
standalone statement.
One second, please. One second, please.
What, yeah.
Do you wish? Okay. Please proceed, Senator.
Thank you,
You have any
Madam
statement?
President. Before you did that, I was going to say that I will revise the statement and say, in my opinion. Which then
On a point of order.
No, that's an improper. I can deal with this. I can deal with this. No. That's an improper innuendo, and you cannot apportion that to anyone without evidence. I will strike that as well. I shall strike that as well, and I stand by the rules.
Madam
Okay, please.
President, I'm not apportioning, I want to say, I'm not apportioning it to anybody specifically.
Who's debating in here? Them or
Senator Handfield? Senator Handfield?
jump in the debate like that?
I am not in the debate. I'm using the rules.
Can't do that.
Senator Michael Bonnet Ellis?
Thank you, Madam
I'm striking that from the record as well. Please proceed.
Madam
Thank you.
President, as I conclude, I want to warn.
And if there is an issue with my ruling, you know what rule to revert to. Thank you. Please proceed.
Madam President, I have moved.
Research it.
Madam President, thank you. Madam President, as I conclude, I would like to warmly welcome the parliamentarians who are arriving in the country this week for the Commonwealth Women's Parliamentary Workshop. We are proud to host or co-host such a distinguished gathering and showcase in the Bahamas to our regional colleagues. We renewed today or this week our commitment to supporting all women who are brave enough to step into the arena of politics. It is not an easy path. It requires grit and grace and an undying belief that public service can be a force for good. May this workshop inspire, empower, and equip more women to take their rightful place at the decision-making tables of the region. Madam President, as always, may God bless you and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator Barnett Ellis, for your contribution. Stand up if you want.
Madam President,
Wait 1 second. Senator Kirkland. You want to make a statement?
just stand on the
Wait 1 second. Senator Kirkland Russell. Senator Kirkland Russell, just 1 second. We have a point of order from Senator Darren
Madam
Pickstall.
President, I am standing on a point of order. Madam President, we witnessed the successful implementation of the equity rate adjustments, right? That the senator is misleading, that she is misleading.
What's the point of
That's
order?
it, that she is misleading.
Say but the rule.
That's what I said, if you would listen. If you would listen, that she is misleading.
Don't touch me.
I'll touch it.
Don't touch me, all right? Let me
Calm
say something. When he
down. Keep your
stands up,
pants
he
in.
should state, as you always tell us.
And I did.
What the point of order is.
I did.
And not just, and wait for the chair before you start speaking.
We did all of that.
These rules gotta apply
We
every chair.
did all of that, Senator Handfield. Senator Handfield, we did all of that. Kindly provide Senator Pickstock to speak. Senator Pickstock, you're recognized by the chair. Please proceed with your point of order and advise the Senate. What is your point of order?
Madam President,
What is your point of order?
It
That's the
seemed as
question
if-
of the chair.
I don't need an echo by you. I don't need an echo by you.
You've already ruled on the point.
I did not.
You've ruled on the point.
This is a different point. If you would
don't
keep,
come and relitigate-
you have ants in your
relitigate a
pants or
point.
something.
No, man, I got
Just
something
sit
else in my
down.
pants, but they don't
Yeah,
want.
yeah. Well, it seems so.
You know
Madam
what?
President, I had already indicated you had given me leave. I stood on a point of order. I said that the member was misleading with respect to BPL, right? We witnessed the successful implementation of the equity rate adjustment, Madam President, right? Which has transformed energy costs for Bahamians.
So can I speak after?
The latest data from BPL speaks to this, Madam President.
But the chair
Madam
has
President,
litigated this
BPL, no, she has
and
not.
ruled.
She did not rule on this point, Madam President. BPL has approximately 94,500 residential customers. The latest analysis provided by BPL indicates
This is a moot
that
point. It is a moot point.
99,636 clients and households received electricity bills between $5 to $19 in January. Madam President, further, an approximately 14,000 households received bills between $20 and $99.99, Madam President. In addition, an approximately 8,283 households received bills between $100 to $124.99. This means that approximately 58,933 households, or 62% of residential customers, received bills under $125 during the month of January. Madam President, and the bills continue to go down. Madam President, to date, the bills are going down. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Bonnet Ellis.
Madam President, a point of clarification. That's not what I said. I said that we are currently experiencing a reduction, and whilst I understand that they're in the campaign spirit, it needs to repeat. I said, right now our bills are lower, but it is projected that there will be an increase.
No, no, no,
Right, and they're still not as low as they were.
no. On a point of order, again, the senator is misleading.
Order, Senator. Order. 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 The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan
On a
Pinder.
point of order, the senator is misleading with that final comment, Madam President. Nowhere in the consultation document did it say that prices would increase. What it said was that there will be, times ahead that we would have to plan for, and that's natural. Price of fuel goes up, the infrastructure cost goes in, but in fact, you can't cherry pick what the report says. We took off $42 million a year in rental generation off of this deal. $42 million that went to the bottom line of BPL. That wasn't passed on. That goes straight to the bottom line of BPL. So $42 million on rentals are gone. You can't cherry pick that. You can't cherry pick that. And in fact, the same provider that she wants to stand and discredit their name in this honorable place was a long-time provider of electricity in this country under a rental agreement. By converting to a PPA of their existing facilities, we saved some $15 to $20 million in rental costs to the bottom line of BPL with a lower cost to power to the consumer as well incorporated. So frankly, Madam President, to stand up here and to try to give campaign little slogans against and contrary to the facts and the reality of what has happened on an energy reform plan is just irresponsible in this honorable place, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder. Senator the Honorable Michael Bonner Ellis.
Madam,
Order. 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 Senator.
thank you, Madam President. What I think all of this goes to show is why the information about this deal needs to be publicized so that there is clarity in terms of it. The Prime Minister's office themselves says that it will be publicized. It needs to be publicized, which means that this information is not in the public domain and ought to be in the public domain to avoid confusion.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Barnett Ellis, Michael Barnett Ellis. You made that point earlier. I think that we can now proceed to the next senator. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam President. In welcoming our international visitors, I want to say that prior to the slogan, "It's better in the Bahamas," we used to say, and I like this one even better, "It is beyond us why anyone would go beyond us." Let me also say to you that we are approaching the heart of the political season. And those on that side, down there, over here, are fully aware of the current data that is going to be 2 straight by Brave Davis. I am very honored for the opportunity to contribute to this mining bill and I pause to thank Almighty God for his blessing. I thank our distinguished Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Edward Davis, Casey, for his support, and I want him to know that the Bahamian people have been inspired, encouraged, and are very hopeful about the future of the Bahamas because of his steady and compassionate leadership. Madam President, with your leave, I would like to preface my contribution by extending sincere condolences to Ms. Pat Neely and family on the passing of her beloved husband and PLP stalwart Councilor, Mr. Ardis Neely. I want to extend condolences to the family of Deaconess Iselin McFall, who we laid to rest this past Saturday. Iselin was also my first cousin who loved her family. I want to also extend condolences to the family of businessman Mario Donato, who passed recently. He was a foreign gentleman who came into this country over 50 years ago and fell in love with the Bahamas, was a successful businessman and a true philanthropist, assisting many throughout the island of Grand Bahama. I want to also congratulate our awesome Carifta track and field and swim team, and I want to sincerely thank these young people for their sacrifice. Preparing for these, whether local or international events, are not easy. And, you know, you have to be dedicated, determined, and disciplined in what you do. And I want to thank them for their great performance. Madam President, this mining bill is yet another landmark piece of legislation that is intended to secure the resources of the country for the Bahamian people. One of the primary objectives of this bill is to prevent the establishment of exploitive mining in the Bahamas. Simply put, mining will be done on an even playing field in our country. Madam President, for several years now, there has been considerable amount of dialogue and other discussion outlining the public interest in both the development and protection of our nation's natural resources. And we believe that those concerns are justified. Madam President, this bill demonstrates that the government is committed to putting Bahamian people first. This brave administration is passing a law that the Bahamian people deserve, and it offers the assurance that any mining operation in this country, whether led by foreign or domestic investors, will be of significant benefit to the citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, while taking every precaution to safeguard our environment and the integrity of our communities. Madam President, a new Department of Mining will be established, which shall consist of, yes, a Director of Mining and other officers as may be necessary for the efficient working of the department. Some of the duties of the Director of Mining shall be, but not limited to oversee exploration, oversee mining, processing, and other operations authorized by the grant of a mineral right under the Act. The mining director will also be responsible to enforce regulations and monitor operations of mining, processing, and other mining-related activities under the Act, to identify and verify the boundaries and landmarks on the ground of any mining operation, to evaluate the commercial availability of mining resources, to protect the hygiene and safety of persons working in and around mining operations. Madam President, the bill is very comprehensive in covering areas of importance and in its framework, such as the application, duration, and renewal of a mineral right, the suspension and cancellation of mineral right, the general rights and obligation of holders of a mineral right, employment and training of employees, procurement of local goods and services. I'll expand on this clause a little more for our listening and watching audience. The holder of mineral rights shall give priority to Bahamian citizens for contracts for service to the extent the terms and conditions of those contracts are competitive to contracts for service offered to non-citizens. B and C, give priority to goods produced in the Bahamas to the extent that they are comparable in quality, quantity, price, and delivery to goods produced outside the Bahamas, and provide reports of procurement of local goods and services to the Minister quarterly regarding its compliance with the requirement of this section. Then there is the rights of landowners, including compensation to the landowner. Madam President, I cannot emphasize enough the intent for the local population benefits from the extraction of the country's natural resources. It is far too easy to find countries around the world where large foreign companies are the sole beneficiary of their resources. Madam President, the bill also requires that all mining activities be strictly guided by the stringent and rigorous standards set out in the Act. We are aware of the very important roles our marine resources and the delicate ecology that exists in our waters play in the sustainability of our #1 industry. Therefore, prioritizing the protection of our local communities and our natural environment is seen as paramount throughout the bill. Madam President, this bill puts a lot of attention on the island of Grand Bahama. I'll give you a scenario. In my community, where I live, the community of Pindus Point, Hunters, Lewis Yard, neighboring communities such as Hebburn Town, Bartlett Hill, those areas, Sunrise, Hawksbill, Wellington. Those areas are on the borderline of many of the major mining businesses that is going on and extracting there in Grand Bahama. And I could tell you that they suffer a lot from blasting, breaking up your house, from dust, from noise.
So these things happening now?
These things have been happening for years.
What is this?
And the people had no recourse.
None.
But this bill,
What this to do?
this bill, see, we don't have time to talk, but Elon Musk and SpaceX. This bill provides the avenue, the platform for those Bahamians who have been suffering for years to not only have a recourse, but to benefit financially from mining that is carrying on. One of the things I truly want to suggest with this bill is very comprehensive in nature. Many of our residents may not truly understand the impact of the bill. So AG, I would suggest that we, in short order, conduct and hold as many
town hall meetings as possible for the residents of Grand Bahama so that they could truly understand what this bill truly means for them. Yes, and so, you know, my colleague here just pinched me a note that one of the concerns for the residents in Grand Bahama is how we decommission these mining plants. Because far too often you would have foreign companies, Madam President, come into these islands, make millions in their mining businesses, pack up and leave the debris, these heavy, large metal pieces of equipment, leave them in our waters, and there is no recourse. This bill fixes that problem as well. And so it is important, Mr. AG, that we truly educate our people. Speaking in that other place, Prime Minister Davis pointed out, and I quote, "Our livelihoods depend on our ability to protect these resources. This is why we have so many national parks and marine protected areas, and why we anticipate creating even more. When we consider the development of our natural resources, we must ensure that what we take, we can replace," end quote. He went on to say, "It must be ensured that development benefits Bahamians first and foremost." Madam President, I wish to just make two additional points before I give a few updates from the Urban Authority desk. The first is that this bill establishes that any mineral resources discovered in this country, whether on public or private land, belongs to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Secondly, the bill outlines provision to aggressively go after any party that seeks to defraud or mislead the public when it comes to their mining activities. Any individual or company who contravenes the law or seeks to assault or hinder officials in the execution of their duties shall face penalties or fines or imprisonment or both. These provisions are to ensure that the rights of Bahamians are protected and secure. Madam President, in this government's blueprint for change, it proposed a modern framework for mining operations in the Bahamas. And yes, for the first time, our country will have a comprehensive regulatory framework and oversight of mining, which reflects Bahamian values, Bahamian interests, and new Bahamian opportunities. Madam President, indeed, this is the Bahamian People's Bill. The administration have listened to the cry and have provided for them a bill that is comprehensive, modern, empowers Bahamians economically, it ensures sustainability, it is ecologically conscious, and it puts Bahamian first. Now, a few urban facts. Madam President, on April 15, the Urban Authority hosts its first annual speech competition here in Nassau at the Foxhill Community Center. Local speech champions representing Nassau, Auckland, Cat Island, Exuma, and Grand Bahama descended here in the capital for what turned out to be an extraordinary display of talent, preparation, courage, and an amazing display of the Kings as well as a little colloquial English. I wish to congratulate all the winners, all participants, and their awesome coaches, especially our students from Grand Bahama. Shania Paul from Walter Parker, who placed third in the primary section. Felancio Russell, who placed second from Sister Mary Patricia School. And Adrian Stewart from 8 Mile Rock High, who placed second overall in the high school category. Job well done. Madam President, I want to also mention that the Office of the Governor General, under the patronage of Her Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Cynthia Pratt, will host the first ever Boys Retreat Conference, May 1st and 2nd. That is this coming Thursday and Friday, right here in Nassau. Oh, listen, man, this event is being held at Government House. And the significant thing about this is, well, let me go into the detail. The event seeks to provide support and resources to at-risk boys between the ages of 12 and 19, empowering and motivating the participants through a variety of engaging activities and interactive discussion tailored to address the boys' various challenges and needs. The conference will feature a mix of activities and sessions, including personal development workshops, spiritual enrichment, and a career fair. These programs are aligned with the vision of the Governor General, which is to build character and self-esteem through the promotion of respect, responsibilities, and values. The conference is free of charge to parents, with all airfares and accommodation for family islanders covered. Now, before I go any further with this, what is so important about this is our dear Governor General recognize that we have to reach these young men before they enter into a life of crime. And so we would have got together with guidance counselors from schools, the police department, community policing department, and with the help of our urban centers, select these boys who will spend 2 days with Her Excellency Dame Cynthia Pratt at Mount Fitzwilliam. So they're not going to no church, hall, or no auditorium, no gymnasium. They are going to spend 2 days at Mount Fitzwilliam. And there's hundreds of young men. Talk about giving a second chance, providing a lifeline of love and compassion to young men. This program takes in the very essence of the Prime Minister's crime prevention strategy plans. Moreover, this program incorporates the true message of Easter, which is, even if you fall or make mistakes, this is not the end. There is forgiveness that leads to a second chance. I'm happy that Urban is a part of the team that is making this wonderful event happen. Yes. Madam President, finally, I want to talk about the fact that the Urban Authority, in strategic partnership with Langston University, Oklahoma, proudly hosted a 2-day national music audition event held on Thursday, April 8, and Saturday, April 19, 2025, at the Edmund Moxie Community Center here in Nassau. This transformative initiative drew 12 graders from across the Bahamas who will graduate in June this year, 2025. Students came from New Providence, Exuma, Cat Island, Abaco, Andros, San Salvador, and Grand Bahama, each bringing with them not just musical talent, but dreams of a brighter tomorrow. Madam President, what is significant about those islands listed is that all of them have vibrant urban renewal marching bands. Madam President, I must mention the Blueprint for Change once again. In the Blueprint for Change, the Davis-led administration committed to ensuring that no Bahamian child is left behind owing to his or her circumstances. The administration pledged to create an even-handed pathway to education and opportunity. This music audition initiative, under the direction of the Urban Renewal Authority, in collaboration with our international partner, Langston University, is a shining example of that commitment, not in talks, but in action. Madam President, our hard-working Minister of Housing and Urban Renewal, the Honorable Keith Bell, gave this report in the other place last Wednesday. But it is so nice, I have to say it twice. I am so very pleased to report to the Senate that because of our Bahamian students' exceptional performance, listen now, 36 Bahamian students were awarded scholarships to Langston University for the fall 2025 semester. The scholarships total a whopping $1.93 million. It is not just the money value of financial aid, but rather music, but rather those 36 and creatives. Those 36. See. I was listening to you while I was listening to you while you was talking. Those 36 scholarships are life-changing investment in the future of our youth. These young talented musicians can now pursue higher education and artistic excellence in a world-class environment. Let us remember that these young men and women are from urban communities, many of them living in difficult circumstances. But thanks be to God that someone handed them an instrument and not a weapon. They are the new role models in their communities and the example that if you believe in yourself, have manners and respect for your elders and your peers, pray and trust in God. My honorable colleagues, it is still better in the Bahamas. Madam President, just for information, the audition panel was led by Professor Mark Gordon, Director of Bands at Langston University, and Ms. Joshua Gordon, Director of Administration, both of whom brought a wealth of experience, passion, and discernment to the process. They were ably supported by our outstanding urban renewal band team leaders, including Superintendent Janice Green, Coordinator, Assistant Superintendent Jason Higgs, Music Director, Inspector Anthony Capron, Assistant Director, Corporal Darrell Cash, and Roland Newton, Music Instructors. These dedicated professionals worked tirelessly to ensure that each participant had the opportunity to shine and be fairly evaluated. Their dedication embodies the spirit of compassionate service that defines the urban renewal movement. Madam President, it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the hard work and dedication of the Urban Renewal Authority team here in Nassau that made this event possible. Of course, I must mention our Minister, the Honorable Keith Bell, Minister of State, the Honorable Lisa Raming, co-chairs, the Honorable Algernon Allen, and Reverend Dr. Diane Francis, and our Managing Director, Mr. Stephen Dean, and his outstanding support staff. Madam President, Co-Chair Reverend Dr. Francis always say that one of our mandates is to uplift, empower, and equip our young people, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, to reach their highest potential through the power of music. Madam President, I am proud of the great work we are doing in urban. I am proud to support this mining bill. May God continue to bless our efforts, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell, for your contribution. As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the business of the Senate do continue beyond 1 p.m. this afternoon.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate continue beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The business of the House will continue beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Madam President. I thought about it. Exactly. Madam President, as I rise to contribute on the mining bill, I would like to first pause as well to warmly welcome the women parliamentarians and members of the CPA who are visiting with us today and seated in the gallery. You can see we are on our best behavior in this place today. And so welcome to our beautiful Bahamas. And we all are looking forward to the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Workshop this week. It's a very important gathering that will strengthen the bond of leadership across our Commonwealth family. And of course, your presence here inspires us all, particularly as women in politics, and your commitment to service we applaud you for. And so may your time among us be rich and refreshing, and a reminder that together indeed we are shaping a stronger, more resilient future. And as my Senate colleague said earlier, who rarely says anything with sense, do spread the word. Do spread the word that it is better in the Bahamas. That is the one good takeaway from his contribution earlier. Madam President, I would like to extend sympathy to our Senate colleague, not our Senate colleague, to our parliamentary colleague in that other place, the Member of Parliament for St. Anne's, Mr. Adrian White, who buried his father, David Sidney White, this past Saturday at the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Kirk, or at least I should say have a service. And so I would like to extend sympathy to Adrian's mom, Mrs. Heather White, and to his brother Spencer, and of course to Adrian. It is a very difficult thing losing anyone, Madam President, and death is so tricky, you could never prepare for it. And no matter how prepared you think you are, it's always tough. It's very hard pill to swallow. And so we extend our sympathy to the member for St. Anne's. Madam President, since we last met, the Garland woman has also died, someone who wrote us into history. And so I would like to also extend sympathy to the husband and family of Patricia Quentin McCollis, who gifted us with stories that are rooted, like really rooted us in our Bahamian soul. We talk about creatives, but you know, the Garland, Bookie and Robbie, Jack, Badabo, these unforgettable characters. Yes. She wrote them in a way where they danced off of their pages and into our hearts as Bahamians. And so we could never forget the gift that she has given us in that way. And I was blessed recently to see her and to tell her how much her work, especially in Evening in Guanima, meant to me. And she was so grateful to hear this. And days later, she sent me an autographed copy of another one of her book, Luska. and other fantastic tales. And there are so many books, I don't even know if we recognize, Talking Bahamian and the 99 Cents Breakfast, and so many other books that she has written. And so I will continue to treasure her works and to share it with young Bahamians in order to keep her spirit alive. Madam President, April is Autism Awareness Month, and it calls us as people to greater understanding, acceptance, and action. I encourage all Bahamians to lend their support to Reach Bahamas, which continues to do meaningful work on behalf of children and families affected by autism. This coming Saturday, Reach will hold its annual Autism Awareness Walk, and I urge all of us as parliamentarians and the public in general to sign up, show up, and walk with purpose so that we can stand together, Madam President, in unity and compassion to build a more inclusive Bahamas where no child, no individual is left behind. And speaking of children, Madam President, I would like to adopt your part of the Communication on Child Protection Month, which is also recognized in April, and reminds us of our duty, our sacred duty, to safeguard the most vulnerable among us, which is our children. And so we commend the Bahamas Crisis Center, as you would have alluded to, for the work that they do for the recently held exhibition in the mall, and the Department of Social Services and all government and non-governmental agencies and organizations across our country who labor night and day, not just during an awareness month, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the protection and welfare of our young people. And so, Madam President, I'd also like to echo calls to promote the 24-hour child protection hotline. There are multiple ones, but just so people could remember easily, the one from the Department of Social Services is 711. So you only have 3 numbers to remember if you know of a child who's in trouble in any way, 711. And that is a lifeline. And please, 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 if you hear something, if you see something, if you know something, if you suspect something, it's better to be wrong and to have that child safe than to be right and to ignore it. And so protecting our children is not just the work of these agencies, but it is the responsibility of all of us. Madam President, I think that everyone here knows that gold is far from my favorite color. But I have to tell you that during the Easter weekend, that was the one time I kept saying, bring the gold, Madam President. And that was when I got to sit on the edge of my seat in my home. And I got to cheer on our athletes from here as they performed so well in Trinidad, Madam President. And you know, they soared, both of them. I'm going to get to that. There was a masterful, we'll save the best for last. There was a masterful performance in Carifta track and field. They worked hard, broke some records. The relay, everything was so good, Madam President. That's probably why my voice is still gone. And Madam President, you know, our team placed second overall. And I must admit, like I said, I was for track and field, And so I was on the edge of my seat, Madam President, cheering them on with the rest of the nation. And our swimmers, Madam President, what a marvel they are. They're the dream team, Madam President, in capturing their 7th consecutive Carifta Aquatics Championship title, cementing our place as regional giants in the pool. So congratulations to all of our athletes and coaches and the proud parents who stand behind them, parents like my Senate colleagues. And you've all made the Bahamas beam with pride. And you know, it's not every day that we agree as opposites in this place, but I think we all agree that we are proud of our athletes and that they did as well at Carifta. Madam President, as I rise today, and each time I rise in this house, in this honorable upper chamber, it's out of love for country and a deep sense of duty to the Bahamian people. And so I'm grateful for my opportunity to add my voice to this important debate today on the Mining Bill 2023. Madam President, throughout history, our ancestors have fought, they've bled, and they've sacrificed to secure for us this beautiful inheritance, our land, our waters, our resources. In fact, I often say, Madam President, that God is so good to us. He placed us, yes, we may be a small nation, but geographically we are mighty indeed, based on where we are located, based on our resources, based on just the beauty all around of our country. And it falls to us today, as parliamentarians, to guard that inheritance with wisdom and with courage. And Madam President, as has been said, we must never allow short-term gain to rob future generations of the blessings that rightfully belong to them. And we must never again stand by while others benefit from what God has entrusted to us. And so, yes, we have a duty not just to ourselves, but to our children, to our children's children, and to our children's children, and all generations to come. And Madam President, whenever there are opportunities to be had from the natural wealth of the Bahamas, Bahamians must come first. And not just in talk, Madam President, but in action. We must see this. We must not just discuss it and say it, but it must happen. And I mean they must come first. Not second, not third, first. Bahamians must be given every opportunity to lead, to own, to profit, and to build generational wealth, and not just a subset of Bahamians, but all Bahamians, from the resources that are ours by birthright. Madam President, whether it's the hotel industry, whether it's mining, whatever it is, we've spoken about it, we have to ensure that the wealth itself is distributed to Bahamians, and not just in job creation, but real wealth, Madam President. So in particular, when Bahamian investors come together, and we have to encourage more Bahamian investors to come together to pool their resources, their expertise, and their commitment to nation building. And when they do, Madam President, they must be given first consideration. Not just as an afterthought, Madam President, but as a deliberate policy of economic empowerment and national pride. We must be committed to this, Madam President. And so I hope to see this, because we cannot continue just cheering from the sidelines, Madam President, while others from elsewhere make fortunes on our soil and in our seas. We cannot continue to have people fly in and leave with more funds that they could even hold in their pockets, while we're just left behind, Madam President. We must be participants. We must be owners, leaders, not just spectators in every industry, Madam President, including mining. Because our national resources are not just commodities to be traded, but they are part of our story, our identity, and our survival. They belong to us. They belong to the Bahamian people.
Order.
And
Order.
any development involving them must be carefully managed in the public interest with full transparency and accountability. And I want to repeat those two words, because those two words would seem to be foreign to this administration. So I said transparency and accountability. And perhaps they need to go back to school and learn what those two words mean. Because, Madam President, that is very important, because they belong to the people, the Bahamian people, our resources. And any development involving them must be carefully managed in the public interest with full transparency and accountability. But it ain't long now, Madam President. It ain't long at all.
Senators.
15 months, less than 2 years, and the Bahamas will be back in grand.
Senator Seymour, 1 second. Order, we have a senator speaking. Can others please not disturb the senator? Thank you.
Yes, Madam President. And so very soon in the Bahamas, we will have greater transparency and accountability, because you know, Madam President, I woke up today, I woke up this morning, and as the senator said earlier, we make no apology for our ability to speak openly about our Christian principles here in the Bahamas. And I woke up this morning giving thanks, Madam President, because indeed this is the day that the Lord has made, and I decided I would be rejoiceful and I would be glad in it. The only regret I had when I woke up this morning, Madam President, was that it was still a new day. But, Madam President, I thank God, because soon, Madam President, it will be a better day in the Bahamas very soon, Madam President. And so, like I said, we have to be owners as Bahamians, Madam President. And I say clearly that it is not enough to claim ownership in just words. Ownership must be seen in who benefits. Ownership must be felt in we're talking about mining. Ownership must be felt in the hands of Bahamian entrepreneurs, workers, and families, Madam President. Why don't you tell us the relevance of a deal that was not ours that you tried to attribute to us earlier? Madam President, as stewards of this country, we must think not just of today, but of tomorrow. We must ensure that the wealth of this nation flows to our children. Like I said, we cannot just be mere just citizens who watch while everyone else gets rich and we're just living at a certain level. So we can't just have our wealth flowing into foreign accounts or temporary projects. So as we approach this mining, we have to be sure that everything is on a solid foundation of a stronger, prouder, and more prosperous Bahamas. That's what we want to see, Madam President. In guarding our inheritance, we guard not just our economy, we guard our dignity, we guard our sovereignty, and we guard our future. Regrettably, Madam President, as we discuss this mining bill today, it is a reminder of how this government continues to mismanage our national inheritance. Crime is raging, healthcare is collapsing, the cost of living is crushing our people, and education is falling apart. Yet the focus remains on deals and contracts that benefit a chosen few. While this mining bill is purported as a chance to protect our God-given resources for the benefit of Bahamians, we are left to wonder, Madam President, who will truly benefit? And where's the clear, transparent plan to ensure that Bahamians come first? Where's the policy? So, Madam President, even when something is tabled and done that appears to be good, we have to wonder, Madam President. We must not allow our natural wealth to become just another victim of chaos, corruption, and broken promises. We must guard our national inheritance, the land, the sea, and the future of our children, with vigilance and courage. The Bahamas belongs to Bahamians, not to special interests, and certainly not to a government that has clearly lost its way. Madam President, we in the opposition will always champion the cause of Bahamians. That's what we are about in our party. We will always stand up for transparency, for fairness, and for putting Bahamians first. Not as a slogan, Madam President, but as a principle. This isn't about T-shirts. This isn't about PR. This isn't about press conferences. This is what we live in our party. And so, Madam President, may we move forward with wisdom, with courage, and an unshakable, an unstoppable commitment to leave the Bahamas better than we found it. Thank you, Madam President. Change is on the way.
On a point of order, Madam President, when you get it.
The chair.
One more speaker. On a point of order.
Thank you, Senator Maxine Seymour, for your contribution. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
I mean, sometimes I wish I was Michael Halkitis.
You can't help yourself.
On a point of order.
What is your point of order, Senator?
Former minister, in her passionate conclusion, completely misled the Bahamian people on her discussion about transparency and her discussion about how they will bring it back. I know the senator is young to politics, but I must remind her that it is the deputy prime minister from their administration who was forced to resign because of a secret deal of which he was a shareholder in, who had a government contract to do major works in this country, undisclosed against the Public Disclosure Act, and without any transparency. Without any transparency. So to sit up and to claim that you have some status that is above, moral compass above anybody else, when they are littered with examples of lack of transparency and self-dealing, Madam President, is completely uncalled for and misleads the Bahamian people, and it really should be stricken from the record.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder. Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Madam President, I would like to clarify, I did indeed say that we will bring even greater transparency and accountability, which is our commitment as a party to when we take government very soon. And Madam President, if we are noting examples, of why, to support our assertions, then I would like the good AG to tell me about that $183 million road contract. If we want to talk about examples, why don't you tell me about that road contract? Why don't you tell me about the moorings? Because that is the current administration. You want to bring examples? Go on, let's hear about that, Madam President. Let's hear about that. That's what I would like to hear about. Because there was no, Madam President, Madam President, there was no tender, no competition, no shame. Only the thing that stopped them was when the public found out.
You won't get no notice.
Thank you.
No matter what you do, you're the minister, not Pentan. You and Darren stuff.
Thank you, Senator Maxine Seymour. Order.
Madam President.
Order.
Yeah, I can keep this low.
Order, Senators. Okay. As many. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Dr. Eresia Hepburn Forbes.
Madam President, first, if you would permit me briefly, I would also like to extend welcome and greetings to all of our esteemed colleagues in the gallery. I hope some of them didn't leave when the others on this side was behaving badly. For them taking time out when they could be relaxing at the beach and spending time with us, we greatly appreciate it. Madam President, also permit me to send birthday greetings to Yulie LaFleur, who celebrated her 90th birthday, a strong Anglican and stalwart. And I had the pleasure this past weekend, of participating in her mass on Saturday and brunch. Madam President, I would also publicly like to congratulate Senator Darren Pickstock on a successful event this past Saturday, Taste and Tell, which was held at Arawak Key, where a host of Bahamians came to participate and was a raving success. Madam President, I will also put a plug in to encourage all members and the general public to support St. Gregory's Anglican Church Fair on May 10th. All are welcome to attend. I told my priest I would not get up in this place without saying so. Madam President, today we gather to discuss a pivotal piece of legislation that stands to shape the future of our nation, the mining bill. This bill is designed to regulate the extraction of our natural resources, ensuring that the benefits are equitably distributed amongst Bahamians while safeguarding our environment. Madam President, if you carefully listen to what the AG had to say, it would be made clear. Currently, as we speak, licenses are given out willy-nilly. What this administration is presenting is a framework to ensure that there's a clear outline. Currently, what is happening with mining in the country? Mining is happening without regulation, but that's what that side used to, no regulation, and so they want us to continue in that vein. Oh, Madam President, what is sustainability? Oh, I didn't know they knew you. Take a seat, okay.
Madam President, point of order. It's very unparliamentary, and it also, hold on, it's very unparliamentary, and it also defames to say that our side is used to no regulation, because we have governed here responsibly in this country on more than one occasion, and we have literally been very accountable and transparent, and we have had regulation. So she needs to give a clear example.
I'm uncertain what Excuse me, Madam President, I am uncertain because is there a regulation that I don't know about? Are we updating a regulation? I'm just saying, clearly that's not. I will continue though, because Madam President, what is sustainability? I know some people love to sing for their supper, but I'm here to talk to the Bahamian people right now. Sustainability is the practice of meeting our current needs, I agree, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. But what does it encompass? See, because people using terms, let's make sure they understand. It encompasses environmental components, economic components, and social components. Madam President, the mining bill has the ability to stimulate the economic growth by attracting both domestic and foreign investments. With structured policies mandating local content provisions, this bill aims to generate employment opportunities for Bahamians and entrepreneurship opportunities. This includes technical training and startup grants for local mining services. Similarly, when we looked at other countries, South Africa Mining Charter includes comparable provisions and has been instrumental in promoting local employment and skills development in their mining sector. This bill includes stringent standards to prevent exploitive mining practices, prioritizing the protection of our delicate ecology, particularly our marine resources, which are vital to our livelihoods. Taking example from Norway's approach to managing its oil resources with a strong emphasis on environmental protection and sustainability, it serves as a model for how we can balance extraction with ecological preservation. The National Investment Fund is proposed to reinvest mining revenues into local communities, ensuring that the benefits of mining are felt at all levels. Oh boy. However, critics in that other place argue that the bill lacks provision to ensure Bahamian ownership, job creation. However, Madam President, this bill has numerous benefits to our people. The bill is designated to extract not only our natural resources, but require local content requirements. The bill mandates that mining companies prioritize hiring of Bahamians, and we will, of course, look for Bahamian entrepreneurs. The bill requires a minimum 25% profit sharing arrangement with the government, a portion of the revenues from the mining to be allocated to the investment fund. The bill includes provisions for technical training programs and grants for local mining services and is prioritizing environmental sustainability. The bill ensures that the mining activities do not compromise the natural resources that Bahamians rely on for our livelihoods. The bill requires regular reporting and audits of mining operations to ensure transparency and accountability with regulation and standards. See, because people just like to say things without actually reading and understanding. They want to tell us about what thinking. Well, the reality is the proof is always with the pudding and the proof is always with the PLP. Madam President, now let's be clear. Any development can have potential for damage. That's a fact. We live in a fragile world. Despite the bill's focus on environmental protection, there are concerns about the potential for ecological damage. We understand mining activities, if not properly managed, could harm our natural habitats. But to address the environmental concerns, the mining bill has several provisions, an environmental management plan. Additionally, this bill designates certain areas as environmentally sensitive, prohibiting mining activities in these regions. The bill also emphasizes the importance of rehabilitating mining sites post-extraction, requiring companies to restore the land to the natural state or purpose for other productive uses. These measures are designed to prevent long-term environmental degradation and promote sustainable mining practices. Because what do we have now?
Nothing.
Okay. Key benefits of the mining bill, again, economic growth, job creation, environmental protection, community development, and equitable profit sharing. Establishing a new Department of Mining and enforcing the proposed standards will require the significant resources to ensure that we have a benefit and the people receive the benefit of this bill. Madam President, again, I ask, what is sustainability? Sustainability in this mining is not just about the economic benefits. It is about ensuring that the mining activities do not compromise the ability of our future generations to meet their needs. This involves implementing practices that minimize the environmental impact, protect societal equity, and ensure long-term economic viability. This act mandates rigorous environmental protection assessments, rehabilitation mining sites, as stated before, encouraging the use of eco-friendly equipment, community engagement, transparency reporting, and reducing energy waste. Madam President, faith without works is dead. Thought without action yields the same results. Madam President, you will hear complaints from the other side consistently, but the Bahamian people have sense, regardless of what their colleagues may think and what they may say in other forums. Bahamians know that this administration is one that has our nation's best interests at heart. This administration knows the people have sense, and the people are with us. This administration, the PLP, is always for the people. In conclusion, Madam President, the mining bill presents opportunities. It is the responsibility to ensure that legislation is crafted in a way that maximizes the benefits for Bahamians while minimizing risks. We must strive to continue for balanced approaches when it comes to economic growth, protecting our environment, and empowering our communities. Let us support this bill like I do, as it truly serves the best interests of our nation and of our people. And Madam President, may God bless this place, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Dr. Dr. Eresia Hepburn Forbes. Thank you, Senator Dr. Eresia Hepburn Forbes, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Just for the wrap-up, Madam President, I thank you. And, you know, when we started the debate, I did an informal census, right, on speakers and how I thought it would go. And the opposition indicated that, you know, they would be light on contribution. But clearly they got the energy today. But I want to. We had a nice audience. I was kind, I thought. I want to thank certainly all colleagues for their contribution and thank everybody for taking the time on an important piece of legislation, even though much that was said in today had nothing to do with the legislation. But I want to thank them for their cooperation and their vibrant debate. And I want to thank the members in the gallery for coming and participating in our lively debate today. I think it's safe to say, Madam President, we maybe we're not on our best behavior today, but I think we did okay. A couple of points that the opposition raised that I think are suitable to be addressed. We heard Senator Henfield speak about consultation and policy. And I have to remind the good senator that the date on this bill is Mining Bill 2023, which would indicate that it has been tabled in Parliament for 2 years. 2 years in the public domain. As we know, every bill tabled in Parliament is uploaded onto our website, Laws Online. So the general public and everybody else has the ability to be able to review this legislation as soon as it's tabled. In fact, we received public comments back on the bill from private sector. I'm talking about the Constitution. I'm getting to policy, just wait. And so we certainly believe, given the amount of feedback we received and the longevity of it was tabled in Parliament, that adequate consultation. Then the minister spoke about policy. And And was clear, there's a draft policy statement in place. And in fact, the bill in Section 4 is what mandates the actual policy to be created and published after consultation. The minister to implement a national mining policy. So it is the actual legislation that mandates the policy to be presented. Just to clarify that. A lot of the conversation today had nothing to do with the mining bill. In fact, I just note that Eyewitness News is profiling the good senator speaking about SpaceX, right? I would like to advise the good senator that the post-landing report has been submitted to the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, which is consistent with the obligations that were provided to SpaceX when they first applied for their landing license and authority. And so the process is continuing. There's no anomaly. The report has now been submitted and under full review. And in fact, that was in the papers today. You know? What is it? No, I'm done. Me? Me. There's one point I think fair to address Minister Henfield on when he spoke about heads of agreements and developers that come into the country and enter heads of agreements. What's that? And heads of agreements. So we know heads of agreements are contracts with the government that a developer has to do a certain development. The mining bill in particular addresses the commercial exploitation of aggregate mining and the minerals found in the Bahamas. The reason why the provision regarding heads of agreement is in here is because when a developer comes in and they have to do some excavation for their development, they use the aggregate for their personal development, not for sale as a commercial product. And that's the distinction, because this handles regulation of commercial mining and commercial mining activities. So they wouldn't have to have a mining license because they're not commercially exploiting the aggregate. Your point is well noted, which was, I think, a different point, in that when we do the heads of agreements, and you use the example, I think, of art and music, but there are a lot of different examples in heads of agreements that obligate the developer to do things. And a historical deficiency, you're right, is regardless of administration, the enforcement of these obligations in the numerous agreements and making sure that developers comply. Well, we recognize that early on as well, that's a deficiency. And our Department of Investments, the Bahamas Investment Authority, has created a separate unit now called the Compliance Unit. And we have staffed the entire Compliance Unit. In fact, we have engaged as a consultant probably the leading compliance professional in the entire Bahamas, Bahamian, to advise us on methodology of compliance, and we have actually started undertaking site visits to the developers to ensure that their obligations in the heads of agreement are being complied with. So we're trying to do the appropriate thing to address that administrative deficiency. And then the last point I wanted to address was the context of the National Investment Fund, and your position that you wanted as a sovereign wealth fund. Well, if you would look at the actual act and the provisions and how it's structured, it is entirely consistent with any sovereign wealth fund found in the world. And in fact, when we developed that legislation, we did a comprehensive benchmark of sovereign wealth funds. Just because the nomenclature is different doesn't mean the actual structure and obligations and framework is different. And so I would encourage again, and maybe I'll have a communication soon on the structure and how it's going to work and how we've segregated it, just to be clear. But we think it's a good piece of legislation. We think it's going to serve the purpose of the country well, with independence and objectivity when it comes to resources of the country to be used for the furtherment of the country. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank my colleagues for a vibrant debate. And I so move for a second reading of a bill for an act to regulate mineral prospecting, mining, and related matters. Thank you, Madam President.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to regulate mineral prospecting, mining, and related matters. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to regulate mining, prospecting, mining, and related matters. Mineral prospecting, sorry.
For the second reading of bills? Committee of the Whole. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the Senate do resolve itself into a committee of the whole with Senator Darren Pickstock in the chair.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with Senator Darren Pickstock as chairman of the committee of the whole. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman, respect for a bill for an act to regulate mineral prospecting, mining, and related matters. I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The long title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that clauses 2 through 36 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 36 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Section 2 through 36 is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that clause 37 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a few movements today to the mining bill. I move the following amendment to clause 37. In subclause 7, insert, I quote, and subclause 6, or and parenthetical 6, after parenthetical 5 at the end of the subclause.
It has been moved and seconded. Sorry, it has been moved
Second.
and seconded that section 37, subclause 7 and 6 after 5 at the end of subclause be amended. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The amendments are agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that clauses 38 through 41 of the bill be agreed.
It has been
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, my mic was off. I move that clauses 38 through 41 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 38 through 41 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Clauses 38 through 41 is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that clause 42 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 42 of the bill be agreed. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a movement to clause 42. The amendment is delete the clause and substitute with the following. 42, fees. The holder of a mineral right, subpart A, shall be subject to prescribed fees and other payment obligations in accordance with the relevant laws of the Bahamas and an agreement entered into pursuant to Section 16 of this Act. Semicolon, subpart B, may be subject to profit-sharing arrangements under which the government shall be entitled to a minimum of 25% of the profits of the mining operations.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 42 be deleted and substituted with a new clause 42. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. A new clause 42 is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that clauses 43 to 67 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 43 through 67 be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Clauses 43 through 67 is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that clause 68 of the bill be agreed. Sorry, Mike. Chairman, I move that clause 68 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved, and the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and colleagues. This one a little long, so please bear with me. Section 68 to 71, please renumber as section 69 to 72. Insert a new clause as 68. So this is new 68. Procedure for fixed penalties. An authorized officer who has reason to believe that a person, defined as the alleged offender, has committed a prescribed offense under the Act or regulations may serve the alleged offender a written fixed penalty notice charging him with the commission of the offense. Subpart 2. At the time of service of the written fixed penalty notice, the authorized officer shall notify the alleged offender, and if the alleged offender does not wish to have a complaint to the offense heard and determined by the Supreme Court, the amount specified in the notice shall be paid to the clerk of the Supreme Court specified in the notice within 14 days after penalty notice is served. Subpart 3, if the alleged offender fails to pay any fine specified in the penalty notice, the minister may institute proceedings against the alleged offender. Subpart 4, the penalty notice shall A, be in the form prescribed by regulations, B, contain a description of the offense, C, specify the fixed penalty fines for the offense as prescribed under the regulations, and D, state that if the alleged offender wishes to waive an appearance before the court, the amount specified in the notice shall be paid into the Supreme Court within 14 days after the notice is served. Subpart 5, no proceedings shall be taken against the alleged offender until the end of the 14 days following the date of the penalty notice. Subpart 6, where the alleged offender does not make payment of the fixed penalty, the notice issued under subsection 1 shall be deemed to be a summons issued by the Supreme Court as specified in the notice for the appearance of that person, and the notice shall serve as a charge sheet for arraignment purposes. Subpart 7, any sums received by the Supreme Court under Subpart 4D may be paid into the Environmental Administration Fund or any sub-fund of the National Investment Fund Act established under Section 50 of this Act. Subpart 8, where a penalty notice has been withdrawn after payment of the penalty, the amount shall be refunded. Subpart 9, for the purpose of this section, fixed penalty means the fine specified in regulations to an offense as may be prescribed in regulations. Thank you.
It has been moved that a new clause 68 be inserted as read. In addition, subpart 3, subpart 5, subpart 6, 7, 8, and 9 be inserted as read. Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a new clause 68, subpart 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. The clause is inserted, the new clause is inserted as read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that clause 69 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 69 of the bill be agreed.
I second.
As those are, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Section 69 is agreed.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move now that clauses 70 and 71 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pittman.
Thank you. Last series of movements, Mr. Chair. Section 70, renumber clauses Q, R, and S as R, S, and T, and insert a new clause Q to be read as Q, relating to the award of a mineral right. And then I got to do 71 too. And then an amendment to clause 71. Delete the clause 71 and substitute the following. Section 71, savings and transitional. No license for a mineral right prior to this act coming into operation shall be saved, except for subpart A, the term of the license, and subpart B, the financial obligations of the holder of the mineral right.
It has been moved that the two clauses be agreed as amended. 70, section 70 and 71. Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 70 and 71 be agreed as read. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Clauses 70 and 71 is agreed as read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that the President do now take the chair.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the President will now take the chair. As many as are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The President will now take the chair. President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has gone through the bill, and there were several amendments made to the bill. Madam President.
Honorable members, Senator Darren Pickstock, Chairman of the Committee of the Whole, has reported that the committee has examined the bill and made several amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Yes, Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to regulate mineral prospecting, mining, and related matters.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to regulate mineral prospecting, mining and related matters.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Mining Act 2023. For the third reading of bills,
There are none further, Madam President.
Right, we changed it to 2024. Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Mining Act 2025.
Thank you,
Madam President, I renew all notices in the name of the government. Madam President, I move that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die.
Is there a second to that? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do, at its rising, do adjourn sine die. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Madam President, thank you. I move that the Senate do now adjourn.